Okay, sounds good.
All right, very good. So, hey, this is Warren Redlich. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm here with Taylor Ogan. Taylor is someone who used to be thought of as a big Tesla supporter, and now some people think he's not so big on Tesla. He's followed by some people in Tesla Q. We're going to talk about Tesla. We're going to talk about some Chinese car companies. We're going to talk about full self-driving. We're going to talk about Lidar. And with that said, and before I get started, I want to thank the Vasa Law Firm in Sweden and all my Patreon supporters for helping this channel grow. Links in the description for Patreon and other various things you could do to support this channel, like the t-shirt, Elon be less wrong. Elon would like, we'll find out who's less wrong or how we can both be less wrong tonight. Taylor, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, just sort of your background, and then we'll get into your views on Tesla after that.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Warren, for having me on. I enjoy your videos. I've been watching for a long time, and I like your merchandise too. So, yeah, thanks again. Yeah, so my background, I've been a Tesla fan, I think, longer than anyone I've probably ever met. I camped out outside of the second Tesla showroom in the world. I have, all the Tesla stuff.
Is that the tequila?
Yeah, I also have some hard hats, and of course,
you got
Tesla shorts.
You got to give us a better view of the tequila.
Oh yeah, I haven't had it yet.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah. So and I've also owned 4 Teslas, and I currently own a Model Y. And I've also owned the stock since its IPO. By the way, I've never been short a stock, and my company never has. So I'm definitely not Tesla Q. But yeah, I've been following Tesla for a very long time, and I saw the inevitability of electric vehicles when I was young, and so before even the first Roadster was out. So following Tesla's every move and Elon's every move, I thought Elon was like a god, and I started following other companies that also are attempting electric vehicles, and so I was the first to point out, oh, here comes another article with the next Tesla killer. I've been joking about that since 2012, and so yeah, so I've followed it for a very long time. I finally saved up enough money, and I bought my first Tesla was a used Tesla, and then I started trading up and then making money off the stock. And so when you drive these things, it's really compelling. And then you see Elon Musk as this just character that is very fun to follow, and no other company has a CEO anywhere close to what Tesla has with Elon. And so I've even been following Tesla before Elon was Elon's their 4th CEO. So there's a lot of history before that, and I'm a nut. Every time I see a Tesla on the street, I still wave to them, but I also, if I see it parked, I'll go up and look at its VIN through the window. So I've been a fanboy if there ever were one, but just as I've seen more and more of the market kind of show its feathers, it's also fun to follow the other companies, and I think a lot of people misinterpret that as Tesla Q, and there are definitely some bad areas for Tesla right now. There always have been, but and sometimes I definitely point those out. But financially, I'm hoping that Tesla succeeds. So yeah, just a bit more.
Could you tell us a little bit about? Could you tell us about Snowball Capital, please?
Yeah. So because of Tesla hooked me, and so following these trends that electric vehicles, that got me into battery technology, and then that got me into autonomous vehicles, and the pros and cons for society as a whole. And so throughout my studies, through you know, middle school, high school, college. You know, this became a real focus of mine. And you know, I've also always been fascinated by investing. And so when I was in college, I had this friend who his name's Jack, and he and I co-founded Snowball together. And you know, I basically picked my smartest friend I knew, and he's like Rain Man. He can memorize anything, and he knew more, you know, a lot more about financials. And so then together we, you know, I said, hey, you want to start something? Because I was looking at jobs in college in the investment space, specifically centered around this kind of stuff. And you know, even firms like ARC, and a lot of firms that were trying to promote this ESG investment philosophy. And when I started looking into a lot more of especially the ESG stuff, because it wasn't just electric vehicles. You know, I'm fascinated by growth stocks. I'm fascinated by technology in general. I mean, you should have seen me yesterday, you know, nerding out at the Apple event. You know, so I've always loved technology. I taught myself how to code at a very young age. And so I've, you know, I jailbroke phones for, you know, people in my school. You know, I was that kind of guy.
Wait, what language did you code in? Or what languages?
Well, so I first learned C++. I didn't even learn Python. I just straight into C++. I took an online class at Stanford, and I mean, it was an adjustment. And then, you know, eventually that transitioned to more languages. But yeah, I would not recommend starting with C++. So it's still my favorite language. So then after, you know, when I was looking at these companies, these firms, I started looking into, you know, their 13Fs and, you know, more of their filings and seeing what they actually hold. And you know, I started seeing companies like ExxonMobil. And these are companies, you know, I won't say their names, but, you know, they
Sorry, you started looking at what forms?
So these companies that, you know, these firms that claim that they're ESG, you know, investment advisors,
Okay.
even, you know, other hedge funds similarly. And they just, you know, when you actually unveil the cloak, you know, they're not as green as they appear. I actually don't like to use the term ESG because it's so, we call it greenwashing. Anyone, you know, now every single company is an ESG company. And also a lot of, you know, when I would interview at these companies, I knew more than they did about things that I was really passionate about. And, you know, that's not a surprise, but even financially. And, you know, I would go into these meetings or into these interviews, and they would say, you know, they would try to tell me about how Tesla makes its own batteries. And I was like, I mean, if you know, and these are companies that, you know, firms that own a lot of Tesla, some of them. And so I was like, how do you miss that? And so, you know, I started realizing that a lot of people are claiming that they know, you know, all about these future trends, and they just, it's kind of a lot of smoke and mirrors, I'd say. And so I saw an opportunity there, and
hey Taylor, I'm getting some comments about your mic level. I think you sound low to me. Is there anything you can do to make yourself louder? It's almost like there's some popping.
Oh, really?
I don't know if
you're popping too.
I don't know where you are. Are you close to it? Is it a lapel mic? Where are you? Where's the mic?
Let's see. I can try this.
Is this better or worse?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's much better.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, cool.
There's a little bit of an echo, but it's better.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, let me know if it's not as.
We'll see what the chat says.
Okay. Yeah. So then, you know, I realized that there's a lot of opportunity, and so I, you know, Jack and I started Snowball Capital, and you know, it's a long biased hedge fund that invests what we say is clean tech, green tech, high tech, and new tech companies, publicly traded companies. And these, you know, are in the spaces of autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, battery, educational technology, telemedicine, which before COVID was, you know, a lot of people didn't even know what that meant. Now, I think almost everyone knows of companies like Teladoc and such. And then, and also clean drinking water. It's tough to find companies in that space that actually are profitable. But these are all areas that even automated manufacturing. The overall theme there is that these companies, in some way, better people's lives. And it's not like a company like Target or Walmart that, all right, they sell affordable goods and they have some solar panels on top of their building. These are companies that in a very direct manner are improving people's lives and also urban efficiencies. And so that's how we started Snowball Capital. We have 3 people. It's small. We're adding actually one more tomorrow, and then one more in a month and a half. So we're growing.
Let me ask this question: when you run a fund like that, what are the jobs you have? Like, is it just research? Is it going out and meeting people at these companies? How does the work? I mean, we're going to get more deeper into Tesla and some other stuff later, but I'm actually just genuinely curious when I see these funds. Like, well, what do people actually do?
Yeah, it's a good question. We with our first hire, Bridget, it was kind of difficult. What do we call you? And she was an intern first, so then we brought her on full time. And so we were like, I guess market research analyst. That's what we came up with. So I think she actually wants to change her job title to something more fun, maybe in light of Elon Musk, changing his job title. It is market research. And so something that we like to do before COVID was every single company, literally every single one of the companies that we even think about investing in, we go and visit their headquarters and we meet with them. We eat lunch with their engineers. We go to each site visit for, it depends if they're in the same city and how long the trip is, but typically 3 days is how long we like to spend at companies. And we see that there's a tremendous value in actually experiencing a lot of what these companies have to offer, rather than just reading their financial statements and looking at their website and trying to find videos online. And so that alone is a tremendous advantage for us. And there's a lot of work to be done leading up to that. And some of these companies, even though we only invest in publicly traded companies, some of these companies are close to IPOing, or they may be pretty far away, and we're just trying to get a sense of the market. And some of these are in nascent markets. So it's a lot of travel, and we haven't been able to visit any. I'm not even eligible to be, well, yesterday I was eligible to be vaccinated, but we obviously can't travel, so it makes it very difficult.
Wait. Sorry, we probably don't want to have this conversation, but I've flown from Florida to New York 3 times without being vaccinated. What's your travel restriction? It's a personal choice. I know things in Florida are a little different. Well, no, but I've flown to New York City. No, I know. It's not just traveling in Florida. I've been in New York City and New Jersey too. No, I've left the state twice since. Okay, so I'm sorry. I just want to understand this, because I have a child who's not much. Forgive me for saying this, because I'm now an old man and you're younger. I have a child who's not much younger than you. The reason I've been in New York City is because my child's in New York City. What is it? Why would you, somebody who's as young as you are, because you're in your roughly mid-20s, why would you be worried about COVID? Well, I'm not. I mean, sure, I'm worried about getting it. I don't think it would hurt me much, but I don't want to spread it to others. And so, if I'm potentially infected, and we actually, we follow China very closely, and so it's kind of crazy how how this all unfolded. We wrote a letter to our investors in January last year, saying this thing that you may have not even heard of yet is going to be bad, really bad. And so, in the span of a month, we, had to read up on everything about, as everyone now has, about, how these types of diseases even spread. And so, yeah, I mean, it's
yeah, it's just it's a
You know,
personal choice.
I don't think you mentioned genomics, but it seems like genomics would be as like a hot field and it would relate to this. Does Snowball Capital look at genomics?
No, but we do look at, I personally am really curious about gene editing. And so, it does not quite fit our investment philosophy, and we may tinker with that, but that's also opening a whole nother can of worms. So, eventually I'd love to hire, 2 people that's their focus. But yeah, right now it's, I try to follow it as closely as I can.
Okay.
But no, yeah, that's not.
So can we dive into Tesla a bit more?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Okay, because I think that's what the audience wants to hear. They know you're famous for various reasons related to Tesla, and just to be clear, by the way, when I looked you up, what I saw on YouTube was you speaking to a legislature supporting Tesla's desire to sell cars, and I think it was Connecticut. So it's genuine. Your credentials for having, at least in the past, being pro-Tesla are pretty well established. I just want to back you up on that.
Yeah,
So my impression is that you were very big on Tesla. You still own Tesla, but now it sounds like you think there are some, I think you specifically said there are some weak points. So give me let's pick one. Give me an example of a weak point that you see in Tesla, or a flaw, a problem. Let's start with one.
Yeah, so I think the big thing is how reliant Tesla is on its expansion on its own cells, the 4680 cells. I think that there's a lot more work to be done there. We know nothing about the safety of those cells. That's a really big thing for, in the battery space. The cost, if they can get the cost that low, it's dependent upon so many different things. And so, yeah, I mean, we can talk a lot more in depth about 4680 specifically, but that's the big one for me.
Okay, so let's focus on 4680 then.
Sure.
So they currently, every vehicle they sell is using non-4680 cells from suppliers.
Yep.
I don't think they're selling any vehicles with 4680 yet. So your concern is, I guess you would say this is a big bet, right? They're betting that like the Model 3 was a big bet that came close to crashing the company, but ended up working out very well.
Yep.
The 4680, by the way, for those who don't know, and thanks to Fred.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Is it Fred Jessup? I think it's Fred Jessup who gave me this. This is a 4680 cell. He 3D prints them. So I always pump him when, I'm pretty sure it's Fred Jessup, but I get confused. Fred, if you're watching, just put something in Twitter, say, hey, that's mine, and tag me. So the 4680 cell, and I should, so Fred printed this. The inside, when you mentioned the safety issue, there's this tabless feature of the 4680, which in theory makes it a lot safer. So what is it? Do you have some information suggesting that there's a reason to believe it's not safe?
No. I mean, I don't have specific information that it may not be safe, but it's weird that they didn't say anything about the safety. And obviously, right, this week, battery safety is a big thing. And granted, Tesla doesn't make those cells. They do make,
what happened this week that meant battery safety was an issue?
Well, there's a massive battery explosion in Texas that killed 2 people.
Sorry, there was a car crash in Texas that killed 2 people.
Yeah.
We don't know whether the batteries played any role in their death or if they were dead anyway.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, yeah, they
and just to be clear, you understand that gasoline cars also catch fire, right?
Yep.
And those fires can kill people too.
Yeah, definitely. And that's an issue with internal combustion engines.
Okay, but so I thought, as I understood Battery Day, and I'm going to guess you watched Battery Day.
Too many times.
So the tabless design reduces cell heating.
Yep.
Right. So I mean, it should be in principle safer. Everyone. I mean, I haven't heard of a battery. Shirley Mung is a. You know who Shirley Mung is? I'm sorry, I don't want to.
Yep.
Okay, so Shirley Mung thought this was great. I haven't heard of anybody in the battery space, battery researchers, whatever, suggesting there's any kind of problem with this. But let me take a step away from that for a second. So I think I'm actually a little bit an outsider in the pro-Tesla community, where I say I actually think the nickel chemistry is relatively unimportant for Tesla's future. I think the iron phosphate chemistry is going to be 80% of the cells going in the future.
I agree.
That's what they're doing at China Model 3 and Model Y. They have some LFP cells. When they go to structural battery pack and single piece castings, and the vehicles weigh a lot less because of the way they're designed, then it will be easier, if not easy, to get 300 miles range with iron phosphate, and iron phosphate costs less than nickel.
Yeah, so, and it's much safer.
It is safer, and it actually, you can charge it to full capacity, where it's you try not to charge a nickel-based cell to full capacity. That's already true with the vehicle. So why is the 4680 nickel cell? Because you could make LFP in a 4680 format, it wouldn't be an issue. I've seen LFP cells in that rough size before.
Really?
Why is this an issue?
I mean, there is almost no one who's making cylindricals in general, except for Tesla. That's LG Chem and Panasonic. But no one makes LFP cylindricals, at least for electric vehicles.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you that I have seen in one of my videos. I made a video a while back about Tesla batteries. This is several months ago. And I had a clip from someone else who was showing the difference between an LFP cell and another cell. And the LFP cell was cylindrical, and it was larger than, I don't think it was as big as 4680, but it was larger than 2170. It was somewhere between 2170 and 4680. So I am confident, based on that limited experience. I'm not saying I researched the question, but I definitely saw a video where there was a guy explaining differences about batteries, and there was an LFP cell that was in a cylindrical format. I don't know any technical reason why you couldn't make LFP in a cylindrical format. Is there a reason why you think it couldn't be done?
So it's been done in the lab level. But first of all, the advantage for cylindricals has always been they're just easier to mass produce. And you literally just wind them, and so it's kind of agnostic to cathode material. But if you're able to produce ternary LFP, it's much better. Now, typically it's a lot more difficult.
What's ternary LFP?
So ternary it's a type of battery. So like cylindricals, like the one you have right there, obviously that's wound. There's also pouch battery. So like your cell phone.
Is ternary like prismatic?
No. So ternary is basically like a big, I don't have anything, but it's like it's kind of like a book. And so, pouch is similar, except you kind of wind it, I guess I have this. You kind of wind it, I don't know if you can see this, not as tight as cylindricals, and then you kind of seal it. And so the thing with pouch batteries though, and that's mostly what LG makes, is that they can expand, and they're not quite as energy dense. Ternary batteries are definitely safer, but again, you have to have a lot of manufacturing ability to do that, and that's why really there are only two companies that do it at a large scale, and that's CATL,
Okay.
CATL, and BYD.
Okay, so let's go back to this fundamental issue. It sounds like your biggest concern is that the high nickel cells that Tesla's trying to make in cylindrical format, and I believe that Panasonic and LG Chem have announced that they are working on 4680 cells themselves, and those cells will probably be, it's not clear yet, those cells will probably be a nickel manganese cell, where there'll be like maybe 2/3 nickel, 1/3 manganese is my impression. You're concerned that Tesla will fail or that the plan to produce 4680 cells in high volume with high nickel in Tesla's own production will not succeed?
No, I just think that it's going to be a lot. I think that, I even have modeled Tesla producing up to 2 gigawatt hours of 4680 this year. But I just do not, I think that there are a lot of, it may not make financial sense in the beginning as they're trying to lower costs. In other words, if they're producing this for $350 per kilowatt hour, that just doesn't make sense. They should keep buying, as they ramp it up.
When you say that, Battery Day pretty much laid out a manufacturing plan, and the manufacturing plan eliminates a bunch of steps, which when you eliminate steps, then that makes the process less expensive. The manufacturing should be less expensive. Is there something that you saw in Battery Day that made you think that this would be a more expensive way of making a nickel-based cell?
So yeah, I mean, obviously you kind of see that stepwise chart that they have. The big thing that I have heard that Tesla is dealing with and still trying to hire a lot of these leadership jobs out is that the dry coated electrode. That's why they purchased Maxwell 2 years ago. And Elon even said at Battery Day, he said, basically it's Maxwell is not quite, they weren't as ahead as we thought they were. And so they're basically what he's saying is we're doing this more in-house. So there's still job postings for, that I track Tesla's job postings closer than anyone.
Just disclosure, Taylor, before the interview, Taylor shared with me some information about Tesla job postings that I don't know. I imagine that's not public, right?
No, but I think, so what it is,
to be clear, I was impressed with it. I don't want people
very cool.
I was impressed with what you showed me. I don't know that I can't verify it, but it looked good.
Yeah, it would be kind of weird to make up, almost 1 million data points, but it's actually very cool. And I think we do this for a lot of companies, because if you track where companies are hiring, I don't know if you saw the news today about, Tesla's, what was it, acting general counsel for the past 3 years, left for Luminar, which is a Lidar company. I saw them posting jobs for that 2 months ago. So, it's kind of, it's a good way to see where a company is in what areas are they trying to expand. And so we overlay all job postings that Tesla posts on a map, and you can interact with it. And again, we do this for almost all companies that we follow. And we wrote this thing; it's proprietary to us. But the Tesla one is really cool, and also there are so many people who follow Tesla that I've been toying with the idea of maybe just making it public, so that people can their charts and everything, and it's an entire database. So I think maybe now that you mention it, maybe I'll have to now. So it's just a click of a button. But yeah, so with they're still hiring. If you can type in electrode, and they're still looking for people with a lot of experience. And they have, I will say, they just hired like probably 8 people with the word electrode in it in just the last 3 weeks. And in 2021, they've been hiring a lot, as well. And by the way, you could also look up, a lot of the keywords in the Tesla job postings before Battery Day. We had a good understanding of what Tesla was going to, announce there. And so, it's very helpful to us. But so this dry coated electrode, no one's been able to do it. And there are a lot of companies that, have been trying to produce this. A lot of really awesome.
Let me just pause you for a second. So at the Q4 investor call, Drew Beglino, not Elon, said that they were ahead of schedule on 4680 cell production. I have spoken with 2 different sources. Because of my YouTube channel, I get contacted by people. I can't verify the reliability of the sources. Both of them, my impression, I have reasons why I found them reliable that I won't get into. In one case, the guy unintentionally, I think, left a trail of information that enabled me to roughly verify identity. And the other one, just very, very credible, the way he spoke, the detail he gave me. Both of them said that they are ahead of schedule in 4680 cell production. These are people who I believe are reliable sources. Do you have sources suggesting that they're having problems with 4680 cell production?
So, I have to be careful and not even,
I'm not asking you to name anybody.
Yeah, no, but, so right after Battery Day, I talked to, I called up every person in the battery space, that I have their phone number. And I talked to the CEO of a very well-known, in my world, but you may have even heard of the company. And it's a battery company that does, a process. They're not even a competitor. But I called him right after, and he said there's this big, apparently, group chat with battery executives and researchers and everything. And he said, in some ways, they were kind of laughing at Tesla's approach because they just didn't say a lot of things. They're like, well, yeah, you didn't mention safety. But also, you know, one of their favorite parts was extracting lithium grade, using table salt to extract battery grade lithium. And they're like, yeah, obviously that's not how it works. And so, but the electrode.
I'm sorry, I just got to ask you this: are these the same people who laughed that somebody would land on orbital rocket booster? I mean, would you agree?
I never get that. Like, people say Tesla can land, you know, he can land rockets on drone ships in the sea. He can do anything. Yeah, it's.
Well, no. Let's be clear. What my point is this: Elon Musk has a history of going and doing things that people said were impossible.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a particular thing that I do with Elon, because I will say that I think Elon is sometimes overly optimistic, right? We can all agree that sometimes sometimes he's a little bit optimistic. And my measure of whether I start believing more in what Elon is saying is when the team is on the same page. So sometimes he'll say something like, oh, we've got a monkey doing this in the lab. And the other guys are like, I didn't think we were revealing that yet. Right. So he didn't really have the team behind him when he made that comment about Neuralink. But Drew Baglino is saying this stuff, not just Elon. When Elon was talking about point to point on Earth with Starship, Gwynne Shotwell said it, not just Elon. So for me, that's like, when it's not just Elon, it makes it more credible. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of people in the battery space, you know, they also kind of, you know, Drew Baglino, he wrote his thesis at Stanford on hydrogen as a promising transport fuel. So, you know, he doesn't actually have, and I'm not one to be speaking, but he doesn't have as much experience, you know, as someone that Tesla could have hired. Now, it's great that he's young.
But I'm just trying to be clear. You talk to some people who are what you call experts in the battery space. You're not going to name them, and they're laughing at what Tesla's trying to do.
So at some points, now one of the things, the first thing that they've said, and that I hear a lot, is tabless is brilliant. They're surprised that no one did, you know, thought of tabless, and maybe, you know, there were research papers on it, but you know, that's really smart. And also, you know, just a larger form factor and a structural battery. They were saying these are great things. And they said, I bet a lot of other companies will try to, you know, have similar approaches to it. There is kind of a patent minefield around it, but so, you know, they said a lot of this is great. Now, but the dry coated electrode is a pretty big, you know, and you see in what Tesla said in its cost reductions and everything, it's not completely reliant upon that, but it's definitely a big factor. And it seems that is holding Tesla up. You can also, you know, you can track these people on LinkedIn, and you can see a lot of people who were in that space, you know, specifically on dry, you know, coating process for electrodes, they're leaving. Now, again, like this, you know, this happens at companies, but they're leaving.
Wait, let me be clear. Do you think Waymo's in trouble?
Well,
I mean, somebody left. Wait. Somebody left at Waymo, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's great. But
were you publicly on? I didn't see on Twitter. Did you say, "Oh, Waymo's dead because the CEO left," or did you not say anything at all about it?
I commented on it, and you know, it's and I don't know, you know, why they did that.
Are people leaving Tesla because they suck and Tesla's hiring better people, or are people leaving Tesla because Tesla sucks and they're looking for better jobs?
I mean, you know, it also could be that they have a lot of experience and now everyone's, you know, throwing money at them. So I'm just saying, you know, when you start adding a lot of these things up, and then, you know, you see in these promo videos that they're literally spoon feeding it into, you know, these rollers. I'm just saying that's a part that, you know, I'm not super confident where Tesla is right now.
Do you watch The Limiting Factor? Somebody brought this up in the chat. The Limiting Factor channel.
I like it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, is he missing something? Because he seems to be fully on board. He seems to think this is all going ahead fully steam. And I've literally talked to somebody who indicated to me that 4680 cell production was ahead of schedule, and that includes the dry battery electrode.
Okay. So I mean, yeah. I don't think that Tesla, I could definitely see Tesla being ahead of schedule. Now, by the way, they can produce these cells without the dry, without dry electrode. It's going to cost more, and they're going to need more floor space. And so, it also will sort of slow down the process. I mean, it definitely will. I don't think super.
All right, let me try this, because I don't find this point of yours credible. So I want to try this. It's my impression that Tesla is planning to install 4680 cell lines with this manufacturing method in Berlin and Texas before the end of this year, and that they will actually be producing 4680 cells in volume before the end of this year. So I guess the question I would have for you is, if Tesla starts producing these cells in volume, and it's pretty obvious that they're not using the space necessary to do something other, because if they don't use dry battery electrode, it takes a lot more space.
Yeah.
Is there a point in time when you say, okay, it looks like they got it?
Yeah, they could. And that's why I think that they will produce 4680 cells, just maybe not with,
No, I'm saying we will see them do it with the Maxwell dry cell process. And I think they're going to be doing that in volume before the end of this year. If they do that before the end of this year, does that change your perspective?
Yeah. Then Tesla is a lot further ahead on 4680 than I thought. And it's entirely possible. But one of the big things was 2 weeks ago when Chris Takamoto, who, if you don't know, he runs Sparks. So the factory is literally divided in two, and in Sparks, Nevada, Gigafactory 1, and he runs Panasonic's division there. And he said, let me just pull it up. He said, again, just 2 weeks ago, he's skeptical of 4680. And again, they're supposed, they're doing a pilot line. LG Chem in 2 years, they said, they'll take them about 2 years to start theirs if they, still are going that way. But he's cited the difficulty to produce. They're prone to overheating and more susceptible
What's
to
his name?
Particle contamination. Chris Takamoto.
And when you say he runs Sparks, what does that mean?
He's head of Panasonic's, I think, US business.
So he's involved in producing cells for Panasonic in Nevada.
Yes.
Okay.
And so he just said that 2 weeks ago, and that kind of, it would be really weird for him. And yes, there is actually a lot of animosity between Tesla and Panasonic at that factory. But
I don't have that impression.
Yeah, I think it was a Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
Had a.
Is it Charlie Grant?
Well, no. I mean, it's just.
I mean,
if it's a story like a year.
If it's a Tesla Q journalist from the Wall Street Journal, I'm not terribly impressed with that. Look, and Panasonic is not producing the high nickel cells. Panasonic is going to be doing nickel manganese cells. If they're doing 4680, they're not going to be the ones doing the high nickel cells, and you would expect them to be behind Tesla because Tesla's doing their own. So, all right. Anyway, let's move on from
Okay.
So the 4680, I can see where we disagree. Okay. So give me another problem. I know we're going to talk about FSD at some point, but maybe before we get to FSD, is there something else that you think is a major problem at Tesla?
So I think, well, at Tesla, at the company or in the stock, because they're
I tend to go more with the company than the stock.
Okay. So well, first of all, it's more of a near-term thing, but it's really important to watch what's happening in China with Tesla, and that concerns me, and it concerns a lot of Tesla bulls because if you follow China closely, and by the way, most of our holdings are in Chinese companies that are headquartered in China or Hong Kong. And so I've been to China almost 24 times. I've spent lots of time there, and we're likely moving our whole company to Shenzhen when this pandemic, hopefully within the next 12 months, because we need to be there. We need, I can sit, in Boston and, but I gotta see this stuff.
Do you know who Jim Rogers is?
Yeah.
Jim Rogers is he's a big time investor, and he's been talking up China for years. So do you speak Chinese?
Yeah, it's not great. But yeah, typically when we go to China, we have, well, all the time, we have an interpreter. Even if I could, if my proficiency improves, then there's business Mandarin, and then there are the dialects. And so, I still take Rosetta Stone, and I'm trying to get back onto it. But yeah, so China, if you follow China closely, then you realize that what's going on in China right now is it could turn into a big deal. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because it could just be nothing. But I think it's important to follow. So
the problem is that the problem is that they're increasing production and they're getting ready to build another factory, and there's some sort of problem there that I'm not here. What's the problem? Where's the problem with everything looks great in China?
So they're not really being super complicit with the local government agencies. And
who's they?
Tesla China.
What? Okay, so do you have some substance behind the story? Where's this coming from?
Yeah, from media in China. So there have been some battery explosions with quite a few Tesla vehicles, and that happens everywhere. And it's typically the 18650 cells made by Panasonic. Those aren't even produced in the United States, but so in Model S and X. The 2170 seem to be a bit safer, but still they're definitely susceptible to thermal runaway. And so regulators have been, watching it as they have because there are other Chinese vehicles and foreign-made electric vehicles that also have battery explosions. And so they're following it closer. But then there's this sudden braking and sudden acceleration issue that I don't know if it's true or not, but there's been a lot of people are following this and protesting about it.
So how do you differentiate something like this from, excuse my French, but bullshit? How do you differentiate this from FUD? People are just making shit up.
So the thing is, again, I don't.
I'm asking you a very clear question. How do you differentiate this from bullshit people are making up?
Which part making up? That they're
that there are problems
that
there's problems with batteries exploding in China, that there's sudden acceleration and braking problems. This is shit I've never heard of. This sounds like people are making shit up. Where are you getting this from? This sounds like bullshit.
Well, so I mean, you can see, I can see with my own eyes when these things start trending. I don't know if you saw the Shanghai Auto Show. A woman.
Yeah, some idiot got on top of a Tesla, and the roof didn't break.
Yeah. So yeah, I know, right? She must have been light. But so what I'm saying is that people are following that, but they're not. So I don't know if these issues actually are issues or people are making them up. I'm just saying that you can't deny that this is influencing people, a lot of buyers in China. And I talk to people in China every day.
Wait. It's influencing buyers in China. They sell every car they make. They have to increase production to meet demand. How is this influencing buyers?
Well, I mean, first of all, Gigafactory 3 was supposed to be, for the first few years, supposed to be just for the Chinese market, and 3 quarters in, they started exporting vehicles. So
because it was more efficient to export them to Europe than it was to export them from the US.
Well, it's a lot easier, if there's enough demand in China, then they can. I'm not saying that there is a demand problem either. They're selling a lot of vehicles. March was huge for Tesla in China. Blew everyone's expectations completely out of the water. I'm not saying that there is a demand issue. And even wait. You just said that consumers were getting concerned and afraid and hesitant to buy a Tesla. That's a demand issue. You can't say I don't think there's a demand. I'm not saying there's a demand issue, but the consumers don't want to buy the cars. I mean, obviously, I would not say that consumers don't want to buy the cars, because they are. I'm saying that now more and more consumers are paying closer attention to these vehicles.
How do you measure what consumers are paying attention to?
So you can see it trending, just similar to on Twitter. What's trending on Chinese social media? You can see how many views compared to a Prius blowing up, or a GAC that just recently had a battery fire. You can see, and Tesla, is obviously a lot. It's more sensationalized. So sometimes it's fair, sometimes it's not fair. That the media loves to cover Tesla. I mean, there's an article every single time, there are dozens of articles written when Musk just, tweets a meme. So, you can love it or hate it. You can't pick and choose though. And so, it's definitely skewed reporting for sure. But it's
aren't you contributing to that?
How so?
Well, I mean, the Tesla Q media is following you. I just saw today, Tweetermeyer just jumped over something you tweeted today. You apparently are feeding Tesla Q media with anti-Tesla material. I mean, I don't know whether it's conscious or not.
I'm also feeding Tesla bulls. I tweet, what's happening with Tesla. And a lot of times, I try not to just tweet news unless it's something that people, I haven't seen. And so I'll say, oh, I haven't seen this anywhere. Most of the time it's Chinese stuff. And so, I share both sides. I've shared incredibly, important analysis, that we've had on Tesla that's very good for Tesla. Also,
okay, so,
I'm not under any impression that like my 1,000 Twitter followers is really, influencing people.
That's how I feel about my Twitter. That's people say that to me, like, Warren, you're moving the stock. I'm pretty sure I'm not moving the stock. Gary Black says that too. He's like, listen, I appreciate you guys saying all this great stuff about me, but I'm pretty sure I'm not moving the stock. So I agree with you on that. So let's go. I don't know if you want to talk, because we covered the battery issue and the China issue, and I want to get to FSD, but before we get to FSD, because I think that's the big one, sure. I want to see if there's anything else that you see as potential issues with Tesla.
That's, what time frame, like this year or the next 2 years?
Let's talk about FSD then, and we'll move on. So okay. We'll because I have other stuff I want to ask you about that's actually even less test related. I know I'm being confrontational, but I want to tell you I'm really enjoying this. I'm really interested in the way you think. Like I argue with Gary Black all the time. He doesn't bother paying attention to me, but I really enjoy watching what he says, even if I disagree with him, because it's good to understand how other people analyze things. This is how you get to be less wrong. T-shirts in the link below. Just kidding. Not kidding. So Tesla is very clearly, not just Elon, but Zach Kirkhorn, Drew Baglino, a lot of the company is betting on FSD as something that will really drive revenue and profits in the future. That full self-driving robotaxis are coming soon, and that it's an all-vision system. They're even, not only have they ditched Lidar, they never even embraced Lidar, they've now ditched radar. So my impression is you think this is the wrong approach and that you think Lidar is necessary. Am I fairly characterizing your view on self-driving cars, or am I missing something?
Yeah, so for a level 2 or level 3 ADAS system, I think that Tesla's system is completely adequate. By the way, I paid for FSD. Fortunately, I got it when it was $8,000 and not $10,000. So, and every Tesla that I've owned that is capable of, I owned one Tesla before, even AP1 was out. But I've always paid for the package because I want to experience it, and it's helpful when you actually drive it every day to really see its limitations. And I see a lot of people on Twitter who love to talk about everything, but they're watching YouTube videos on it, or they're just hearing.
Just to be clear, you don't have the beta, right? You just have regular.
No,
FSD.
I do not have the beta. No.
Okay.
And so so I've been, once Elon started saying level 5. That's where I started saying, whoa, hold on. And by the way, the language around Tesla full self-driving, you might as well put a trademark on it, capitalize, the first letters in those words, because that's something that Tesla, it's a package that Tesla is calling full self-driving. And a lot of people in the industry do not like that they're calling it that. But Tesla has been very clear as a company from the get-go, and to up until, I don't know, I haven't checked the website last week, but I doubt language has changed much about what the capabilities, because they're selling a product and they can't recognize all of that revenue, from that. So immediately. And by the way, we have around just under $1 billion in FSD deferred revenue that has not been recognized yet. So that's not even that big. So I don't think that, they, whatever, what I'm about to say is
Yeah, they have more Bitcoin gains. They have more Bitcoin gains.
Yeah.
Unrecognized
Like
Bitcoin gains.
Yeah, but so Tesla has been very clear from the beginning on its, what you can expect. The driver has to be in the driver's seat, and they have to be paying some level of attention, or they have to be ready to take over. And so that's, by definition, is level 2. And it's, level 3 is where the fault, is then on the vehicle and the
well, what would you call, do you have Smart Summon?
Yeah, smart. Yes, I do.
Have you used it?
Yeah,
what would you call that in terms of levels?
In a parking lot. So that would be level 2, because you, the operator, you have to, be in control. You have to be nearby. You have to be ready to take over. Also,
wait. If you can't really take over. You can't steer or brake.
No, you can take over. You
can't steer.
You can stop the vehicle.
Right, but you can't steer. You can't accelerate.
You're still in control.
All you can do is say stop.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I bring that up,
control.
The reason I bring that up is not really. This isn't necessarily an argument with you. This is an argument I have with almost everyone. I think the level thing's outdated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't think it makes any sense.
Yeah.
I think the whole concept of levels 2, 3, 4, 5 is nonsense. You compare how it drives compare it to the average human. I'll give you another example. You probably know people like this too. I have 2 children who are, one is a learner's permit, one has a driver's license. Neither one of them has ever, one of them drove on the Florida Turnpike once, but they, generally speaking, will not drive on an interstate highway. So my child who has a driver's license who will not drive on an interstate highway, is my child level 5? There are people who are afraid to drive in Manhattan, and Boston is probably worse than Manhattan. Would you agree that
autonomous vehicles? Yeah.
No, but I mean for regular humans, like you've driven in Manhattan, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
If you drive in New York City, there's people who aren't comfortable driving in New York City. So I would argue there's an awful lot of people, there's an awful lot of humans with driver's licenses who really aren't level 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So the terminology, now I don't think it should be abolished. We definitely, government agencies need to be able to set standards for these things. You can't just do away with the terms. That would be a nightmare. So for the time being, there are pretty clear levels, and so Tesla is level 2. A driver has to be in the vehicle when it is operating, even on the beta. And so what I ask people who believe that that it could everything that Elon says. And maybe it's just on Elon time, and I was definitely guilty of that, in the earlier years of my following of Tesla. But I ask people, what year or quarter, or in how many months? Some people it's days. Will I be able to have my car drop me off at work, and then operate autonomously as a robotaxi while I work, and then pick me up and take me home? And when you ask people that, then they start saying, well, and then, I don't know, like maybe this year. Elon says level 5 by the end of this year. It's not just not going to happen. So.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. I think an important part of that question is where. So if you're in Massachusetts, I would say 2024, 2025. If you're in Florida, I would say possibly 2022.
I don't know. I mean, Boston is probably the most difficult city to operate.
No, I mean regulatory. I mean the regulatory state. I mean that Massachusetts is going to be much more difficult in terms of allowing self-driving cars than Florida, which has already legalized them.
Well, I mean, those are both interesting comparisons, because you have MIT here, and MIT does a lot. I see autonomous vehicles on the road quite often, not nearly as as in California or even Florida. Orlando is like the hub of Florida's autonomous vehicles. But so I think it also may not be state by state. Florida even has specific regulation, early regulation on that. I think now it's like 32 states. Yeah, as a state.
What's Florida's regulation on this that I missed?
I believe that Florida, you can apply for a permit through the Florida DMV to operate. But the thing is, you still have to go through the county, and yeah, I think that's what it is in Florida. But yeah, there are quite a few states that have this at the state level. Sometimes it's just at the county level. Sometimes it's just in certain zones.
I'm not going to say you're wrong because I can't know it. I don't know what you're referring to, but I've read the Florida statutes and I haven't seen anything that would authorize this requirement of an permit for self-driving car.
Obviously, I don't every single state by state, but I've ridden in autonomous vehicles in Florida, so I know that there's something. And by the way, when you say state by state and you say, well, this state at this time, that is, a lot of the Tesla community would shoot you for saying that. That's geofencing.
No. I'm not saying that
that's regulatory geofencing.
Well, that's an unfair burden to place on Tesla to say, well, it's not really level 5 if Massachusetts won't let it operate here.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying that, technically you're saying that word that they do not like to, throw around with Tesla in the same sentence. But, and that's totally how it's going to happen. Regulatory geofencing will happen for every single company. And so, this is why I also see China as more of a leader, because they have, an authoritarian dictatorship that can just, sign this into law much easier than, state by state in the United States.
I agree with you on this, by the way. I think China could very well be the leader in adopting self-driving cars if they're not already.
And if I ran an autonomous vehicle company, I would not be doing my testing in the United States. I'd maybe do some stuff in California, and actually outside of Detroit. There's a big. Okay,
but let's get away from the regulatory environment. Let's get to the technology.
Okay. Sure.
So Tesla is using an all-vision approach. You have publicly said that you think Lidar is necessary. Why do you think Lidar is necessary?
So I do not think that Tesla can achieve level 5 autonomy or even level 4 with the current hardware suite that it has.
Why?
Well, because my car can't even navigate itself in a parking lot, and it can't. There are inherent blind spots, and we even see these with these FSD beta videos. The cameras are great, but they, especially if they're not positioned in the right areas. And by the way, you should look at the Shanghai Auto Show. There are tons of companies that are releasing cars, and these aren't even for level 4. They never even say that they'll ever get there. They're for level 3 and level 2. But ADAS, that's a big thing that people are willing to pay up for. The take rate, if as you probably know, in China is less than.
You said there are inherent blind spots. Give me an example of an inherent blind spot in Tesla's setup.
So there's so when a car is turning, onto, I don't know how to explain it.
Is this the argument that 2-bit Da Vinci made that was debunked, or do you have something more serious than that? Because 2-bit Da Vinci made that claim. Ricky from 2-bit Da Vinci made that claim, and it was debunked by people who know more about Tesla's camera system. So I mean, in other words, you pull up to an intersection, you're going to make a right turn. There's a vehicle coming from the left. You're contending that Tesla can't see that car coming, that there's a blind spot.
At certain angles, it cannot, or it has difficulty in seeing them. And it's just not. You can play with the angles, and you can see that But what they're doing is, and you can even see it in the latest beta, past 2 latest beta. They're creeping out, so that they can angle those cameras better to see oncoming traffic. But there's also there are so those are blind spots, but also the computer is the new hardware 2 FSD in-house computer that Tesla's been developing.
Sorry, wait a minute.
In my vehicle.
You're referring to the one that's in the current generation model, the Model Y, or you're referring, when you say hardware 2, my impression is the chip that's in the current cars, Elon sort of changed the nomenclature, I think. My impression was that the chip you have is FSD version 3, and that there's a version 4 chip that's on the horizon somewhere that they're holding off on.
Yeah, and the fact that they're even developing a more powerful chip is pretty tough. You know, Huawei just even came out with a chip that's you know, has you know, more than twice as much you know, raw compute power than what the chip in my car has. And I, you know, I bet that Tesla will have, you know, a very powerful chip coming forward. That's a hardware change though. And so again, it goes back to, you know, I don't think that they can achieve.
So sorry, is the hardware issue vision or is the hardware issue processing, or is it both?
It's both. Yeah, it's both. So
okay, so let's be clear. The vision problem you're saying is that having cameras only, or at least not having cameras with the right angles, means that you don't see everything everywhere. So how does LiDAR solve that problem?
Yeah, so it depends. You know, there's solid state LiDAR. You've probably seen LiDAR as pucks. You know, and they used to be, they still are pretty ugly.
Let me phrase my question a little bit differently. I understand if you put LiDAR on the roof of the car, then it's going to have a 360-degree view, and then LiDAR might have some advantage, arguably. But if the LiDAR's in the front of the car, like Lucid Motors is supposedly doing, then that's not going to give you 360-degree or even 90-degree views. But
it's going to get you that blind spot that Tesla, you need to see a vehicle at least 120 meters for oncoming traffic. And so, you know, the cameras, if they're pointed directly at—
Sorry, 120 meters?
Yeah.
Why 100? Typically, how did you pick that number?
That's what a lot of these companies, for some reason, 120 meters is kind of like the holy grail. It's like the $100 per kilowatt hour.
Well, I think you would agree with me that 60 miles an hour is 88 feet per second, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so 120 meters is significantly more than 3 times 88 feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's
that would be like a 4-second plus window at 60 miles an hour.
And if you're creeping into oncoming traffic, you know, what are you going to do? Just stop once you've crept out enough? So, you know, so that's why they're positioning those LiDARs in those areas. And by the way, I actually saw the first Lucid that was you know, wrapped in the camouflage 2 or 3 weeks ago. We actually went down to Connecticut again to support Connecticut passing a bill trying to allow direct sales to consumers for Tesla. Some people may not know, Tesla still cannot sell cars in Connecticut. And so we went down to, you know, support that cause. And Lucid and Rivian would also, you know, be subject to the same thing because of these antiquated dealership franchise laws. I still can't believe it.
Okay, but hang on. Let me
so I saw Lucid, and it was not in good shape. It was like there were still 3D printed parts all over the car. I don't think they're selling a car this year.
He's trying to make me like him. Do you see that? He's trying to make me like him. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, but interestingly, where also the frunk didn't even open, but where the LiDAR is in the front, I said, is this where the LiDAR, you know, is? And I knew the answer. And the guys they were engineers too. And they said, yeah, but they were like really weird about it. And so they said, it's not going to look like that. It's going to still be positioned there. But so they still haven't even figured out where exactly they want to put it. And I bet actually this auto show, you know, in Shanghai, it's the first real global auto show that, you know, that a lot of companies have been just, you know, bottling up these awesome vehicles during COVID.
Can I just,
so a lot of things coming out.
Can I just ask you, because this is from Philip, who did a super chat, but also somebody that I've spoken with a few times, including live stream with Jessica Kirsch. He says cameras can see as far as a LiDAR. Both are photon receptors. Why would it be anything other? That makes no sense. Why would LiDAR be able to see at a greater distance than a camera?
Well, I mean, this is a question that why would LiDAR companies even exist if they were the same? Obviously, LiDAR can see a lot further. And by the way, I don't think anyone.
No, but they both use photons.
Yeah,
the photons are coming from the car that's coming towards you because the sunlight or ambient light or whatever is reflecting off that car, and it travels to the camera. And you know, I think you could go if the camera doesn't have high enough resolution to see at that distance. There's things you could argue, but you know, anything that LiDAR can see, a camera can see. You with me?
Oh, I just
You with me?
talked out. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I
So
just-
anything that a LiDAR can see, a camera can see. Am I missing something there?
No, definitely, definitely not. So, well, first of all, it's using lasers. So they're refracting lasers off of objects to understand the distance, and that's why they used to be pucks. So they'd spin, a thing around really quickly, and now that's why solid state lidar, is pretty awesome, especially actually for cost as well. It's not a moving part, but yeah. So that's how lidar can see, not the same way as cameras do. And it's a fusion. It's a cocktail. I don't think that any company can autonomously drive a car with just using lidar.
Are you familiar with
cameras as well?
Are you familiar with James Doma?
No.
Okay, so Dave Lee has done several interviews with James Doma. I'm going to suggest you watch his interviews with James Doma. James Doma talked about something that Andrej Karpathy talked about, which is, and Andrej Karpathy's been talking about this for a while, that they're using the cameras and they use the term pseudo lidar.
Yep.
Okay, that they use the cameras to essentially, and they use machine learning to essentially emulate the data that I don't think this is the purpose, but it effectively accomplishes what you are hoping to obtain with LiDAR. I think, as I understand it, the big advantage of LiDAR is not that it can see farther, but that it's better at measuring distance.
Yeah.
It's not that it can see something 120 meters away that the camera can't see. It's that in theory, the LiDAR, because you're able to measure, I think, the Doppler effect of the light, you're able to measure distances and velocities of objects. So the problem is that if, as Andrej Karpathy says, and again, this isn't Elon, this is Andrej Karpathy, and this is backed up by James Doma, and I think I've seen at least one other person I would call an expert say this, using machine learning, using cameras, you can get the same or better results from cameras than you can get from LiDAR, and you use less electricity, which gives you more range, and it costs less. So what part of that is mistaken? And Bruce, thank you for your support. And sorry, just 1 second. Thank you, Bruce, and thank you. I just got to thank people when they, and thank you, Trent. So go ahead. What am I missing when I say that machine learning combined with cameras can do as well or better than LiDAR?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, you have to point them in the right direction. And so that's, what I'm referring to. If you pointed a camera where, these side mounted LiDARs are on the front bumper, like some cars are doing, then, the camera could see the camera could see even further than that, but it needs to be pointed there in the first place.
Is it your impression that the Tesla cameras do not have 360-degree view?
At what distance? No.
That's not. Is it your impression that the Tesla cars do not have a 360-degree view? That's a simple question. We can talk about distance in a minute.
I mean, well, it totally within, near range, like about 30 meters to 45 meters is typically what they say. That it theoretically has 360-degree view.
So you're saying at a certain distance, at a certain angle, Tesla's cameras can't see.
Yeah, once it's further out.
What's the angle at which?
Especially if there's an obstruction as well, and one camera is just completely blocked out, which happens all the time.
Well, wait a minute. LiDAR can be obstructed, can it?
Yeah, of course.
So what's the difference between cameras being obstructed and LiDAR? What's the difference between cameras being obstructed and LiDAR being obstructed?
So the placement is important. So like, could Tesla put cameras on the left and right bumpers? Yes, they could, and that would improve it for sure. Keep in mind, it was 2016 when Tesla rolled out the current suite, and so you have to assume a lot could have changed. But the thing about LiDAR is that it's about depth. So you basically ping a laser out, and it bounces back, and you can see the exact you can time
how long it took, and how far the object was away, and you can also do Doppler effect to see speed.
Yes. So
relative speed
with cameras, and even in my car, I see this. Sometimes it picks up the traffic light that's facing the other direction. Now it's looking for what color that light is, but it doesn't know the exact angle. And if you want to focus more compute power to that, that specific stoplight, for the cameras, to see if it can, which angle it's facing. First, again, we talk about compute power, but LiDAR.
Wait. Okay, I got to stop you there. I got to stop you there. The compute power is not assigned to a traffic light. Do you, this is a big question now. Do you understand how Tesla's machine learning works to interpret what the cameras see?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Do you think that there's some point where the compute power is allocated to a particular object?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's analyzing that red light.
Yes, it
Okay,
focuses.
so I'm going to disagree with
power.
you here. I'm going to
Okay.
disagree with you. Here's how I understand that it works. The vehicle is receiving a ridiculous amount of data from 8 cameras in real time. And it takes all this data in, and it's using machine learning. It's not using hand-coded. Nobody wrote this in C++. It's receiving a lot of data, and it goes through an inference chip that has weights that have been programmed by the training computer, which ultimately will be Dojo, but isn't Dojo yet. And no one said focus on the traffic light, and no one knows what exactly the inference chip is doing, because humans aren't capable of understanding exactly what the chip is doing. What it is doing is it's taking all the data in and then identifying objects like traffic lights and stop signs and people and cars, and predicting where it thinks they will move, if they will move, predicting whether they will move and if they will move. And that's what the compute power is doing. It is not focusing on one object. You and I, when we drive, we see somebody, I can't speak for you. If I see a girl in a bikini, I might get distracted and my compute power might focus on the girl in the bikini. The car doesn't do that. The idea that the car is compute power is focused on a particular object is, in my opinion, and maybe you know more about this than I do, but I think I'm going with what Andrej Karpathy and James Doma say about how this works. That's not how the compute works. The compute power is not allocated to an object. It is analyzing everything constantly, all the time.
So then why would they need a new chip? And why would they
don't need a new chip.
Another input, which is
they don't need a new chip.
Okay, so then they should, they should just give up working on that chip.
Elon has said they don't need the new chip yet. My impression is that the new chip will probably be used in the 2023 compact, but everything Elon has said, and Andrej Karpathy has backed him up on this, and I think James Doma agrees that this makes sense, that the compute power they have in the car now, in your car, is sufficient. The challenge is getting enough data and training. You need more data, and you need to train based on the data, and you need to learn from effectively mistakes. So when there's flicker did you listen to Andrej Karpathy's interview on the Robot Brain podcast?
Yeah.
So he talked about this concept called flicker, that the car's driving along and it's identifying objects. As far as I understand this, it's doing 2 particular things. It may be more, but there's 2 particular things. One is it's identifying objects, and 2, it's trying to predict where that object might move. It's established sort of a ballistic probability vector on where this object might move. So one of the things he specifically mentioned that stood out to me was he talked about flicker, that it sees a stop sign, and then it changes its mind about whether it's a stop sign or not. And this is an objective measure that Tesla can use and say, okay, it's not having trouble identifying that object. Let's take this experience and let's query the fleet to see whether other people have seen similar situations, other vehicles have seen similar situations, and let's retrain the software so that we can do better on identifying objects. Right? So that's people think that it's all about interventions, but interventions become irrelevant when the cars get better than human. But then at a certain point, the input is wrong. Right? At some point, human, and I've even in conversations, this is one of those things where I have these conversations with Tesla bulls. There are people in the Tesla bull community who are still more skeptical about FSD. I'm more optimistic about FSD. And they will say, well, when I drive the car, I intervene in this a lot more than my wife does. Well, that's a sign that interventions are not an objective measure of how well the car is driving and how well the car is identifying objects. Because if you intervene more than I do, then it's not learning from objective information, it's learning from your and my subjective input, right? So we need to identify objective inputs. And the fact that Andrej Karpathy, I suspected this already, but the fact that he talked about a specific objective thing that they can measure and decide, okay, is this identifying objects well? That's a really, really positive sign for me that they know what they're doing better than people like you and me who, I'm no offense, but I don't think you know machine learning much better than I do. Andre Karpathy knows a lot more about machine learning than you and I do, and James Doma knows a lot more about it than you and I do. They're on the right track there. And then if an object moves outside, he didn't say this, but I'm pretty confident this is something they're looking for. If an object that it's identified moves outside of where the probabilistic vector space said it would move, then that's something that needs to be retrained, right? And so that's something that they're working on. So does that sound like an accurate description to you of how you understand how self-driving learns, how the FSD learns?
So first of all, Karpathy is a genius. Everyone knows, like he is one of the most highly regarded people in the space. And all of what he says in this makes sense for a level 2 system. But once you start getting to level 5, there's obviously a huge step, or even level 4. You can't have the human ready to take over. And so with this, so in other words, the chip is actually sufficient for what it's doing now, according to him.
Well, wait. No, look, what it's trying to do is identify objects and predict where they're going to move. And if it's able to identify all the objects in its viewing field, including ones you think are too far away, but I think you're wrong about that. If it's able to identify all relevant objects and predict well where they're going to move, then it should be able to drive fine, whether you call it level 2 or level 5. Once it's able to identify all the objects and predict where they're going to move well, where's the problem?
Yeah, if you can, so obviously,
what does this have to do with the level?
That would be a solution. Then you would have solved self-driving vehicles.
But that's what they're doing. What am I missing there? That's what they're doing.
Well, they're not seeing all the objects, is what I'm saying. And I mean, they still have an issue with white semi-trucks trailers.
Where did you get that from?
Green the Only. He has a Twitter where he basically drives it straight in. I mean, unfortunately, we saw this with the Joshua Brown, accident. But
what's the Joshua Brown accident?
It was the first death that was on autopilot.
What year was that?
2017.
Okay, can we focus on 2020 and 2021?
Yeah, sure. But again, it's the same. It's the same hardware in these vehicles. He was on.
No. The hardware is different. The chips are entirely different. I think they're using new cameras.
Yep.
2017 were different vehicles. 2018 was the Model 3 came out, and as a new hardware suite came out with what is this problem? I understand that and I think that incident that you're talking about was actually was on a road, right? That was in Florida, right? That was on US 441. I drive there. I literally just drove that. That's on the way to my in-laws' house. So I know where that happened. That was years ago. Okay, so we're not talking about the 2017 Autopilot 1. We're talking about the current Autopilot or FSD.
A car with the new hardware, the latest hardware, is also having difficulty seeing.
So, and where would I see? Where would I find this?
Green the Only, Twitter. It was like I don't know. He pulled it back up.
And it was a white semi.
Yeah, just in a parking lot. I don't know how he found it, but so
when did you see this tweet, or where did you see this?
Probably 2 months ago.
Okay, everybody in the chat, do your research. Let me know what you find there. Go ahead. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah. So I'm again, it was just an example. But so with how this flickering, you can even see it. I see it in my car with the light flickering, other cars around me flickering. Should it see this? One of the craziest things is when a vehicle changes from a pickup truck to a semi truck and then down to a small sedan, and all within just a second. And so obviously the system's trying to perceive what this is, and should we even pay attention to it? And so path prediction, every autonomous vehicle company does this, and there are a lot of different approaches to it. And I don't know which one is right or wrong. Tesla's Tesla's not the only one doing with that same type of path prediction. But when you say it
so let me just pause you for a second. Bruce Banner, who I follow, says that the incident you're talking about was a radar problem with reflection on a surface. So if they stop using radar, doesn't that solve that problem? I mean, Elon has said the problem with radar, and I think it's a similar problem with LiDAR, is they don't have the same pixel density that that cameras have.
So I mean, I had 2 cars with AP1, and I never had phantom braking. And the phantom braking is, that's a radar issue. And so that's, maybe another reason that they're moving away from that. But yeah, so that was a radar issue.
Let's see if we can agree on something. I think we agree that Tesla's FSD software and hardware currently do not successfully identify every object well. And that is why Andrej Karpathy talked about the flicker problem, that they're using flicker to improve it. When they see flicker, when they see misidentification or questionable identification, then they use that to improve the software. So, I mean, I don't think we disagree there that it's not currently level 5. The question isn't whether it's currently level 5. It's not. And I don't even like using the term level 5. The question is, what's preventing them from getting there? So Elon and Karpathy and Doma have all talked about that they're shifting to this new version of the software, which is coming out soon, version 9 for the FSD beta. I don't think you're getting that yet. It's sometime in the next couple of months, hopefully. Yep. That instead of looking at 8 separate camera images, a succession of 8 separate camera images, it's going to be interpreting video streams. It's going 4D. And that will, they believe, and I think Elon and Andrej Karpathy are already driving the beta or the alpha of this, that it's already working. And this is one of those things that I'm actually doing a Clubhouse room on this on Saturday. The challenge is it's really hard for you and I and other humans to measure how well it's doing because we don't have access to whatever Tesla has inside to objectively measure how effective it is.
So, I mean, however many months ago, Elon tweeted that, the alpha version that he has in his personal vehicle is that one, it drove him from, I think he said, his house to a store or to work or something, with zero intervention. And, now we've seen that, what he was running. And, that,
what do you mean? What did we see?
Well, now there are people with that beta that, and again, they keep rewriting, as they say. And so, it's a even different, a different version now, but eventually, that beta was released to the limited fleet of beta testers. And so, if he were running some, system that, some beta that is just, he can sit in the back of his car while it drives itself, then, that would be something.
Okay, but they've never said they're doing that. And Karpathy specifically said every time in the Robot Brain podcast, Karpathy specifically said, he can see it's getting better, but he still has to monitor it because it still makes mistakes. There's no question that it still makes mistakes. The challenge is to get it to the point where it has enough data and it has the right structure that it can learn sufficiently to get there, right? That's the challenge. So do you have a reason to think that they don't have everything they need in hardware to get there?
So, yeah, I think that, and by the way, some of the top people from Lidar companies in the space, they even say, and this actually shocked me, when I started asking them, they said, I say, will Lidar, in 2030, will every car that, is level 4 or higher have Lidar? And a lot of them say no, that Lidar is kind of a stepping stone to get us, to that point. Eventually, you may be able to operate vehicles with, just vision. But the thing is, there are companies that were literally started before, after Tesla, released full self-driving package capability, they call it, that use Lidar, that now have Robotaxis operating.
Where?
They weren't even in Shenzhen.
How many miles have they driven?
We should get their first quarter report soon.
No, I mean, how many miles were they driven in testing before they had human passengers?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. Before they actually started.
How do you know they're safe?
Well, they haven't had any accidents yet.
Okay.
But
Sorry.
the thing
Sorry.
is, like, that's happening, and Tesla is not doing that.
How do you know that they're not using remote drivers?
You think someone's like sitting with a steering wheel?
I just asked you a question. How do you know they're not using remote drivers?
I don't know how anyone would I guess prove that.
Right. Well, Waymo's been doing this for more than a year, right? How long has Waymo been doing this in Arizona?
Just in Arizona with the general public, or
they've had a Waymo service that operates without a human driver in it. How long have they been doing that?
I think 5 quarters.
Okay, why haven't they scaled?
Well, they're doing it. That's
why haven't they scaled? If it's working, why haven't they scaled?
So for Waymo specifically,
because they're using remote drivers. Because it doesn't work. That's why the CEO quit. It doesn't work. They're faking it.
So you really think that there's someone with a steering wheel?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't prove it. I don't have any data. This is an opinion. If it worked, they would have scaled. If it worked, they would have expanded more area. If it worked, they would have scaled. They haven't scaled because it doesn't work. It's a lie.
Okay.
Look, do you think, let me take a step away from this argument for a second. Let's just go to something because I think we might share something. Do you think Lucid's for real?
What do you mean for real?
Do you think that Lucid is going to deliver? Let's start with this. Do you think Lucid is going to deliver a car with over 500 miles of EPA rated range before the end of this year?
If the EPA rates it, well, first of all, I don't think that they will deliver cars to any customers outside of maybe employees in this fiscal year. No.
Okay, so you and I agree on that.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay, because I have predicted they will not deliver a car to a customer this year.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you think it's odd that Lucid has not allowed a journalist to drive their car?
Yeah, they just have to. I mean, I don't even know if anyone sat in the passenger seat. They like to put them in the back seat.
Oh, I think you're right. I think they do. No, I just saw, what's her name? Transport Evolved. I think she rode in the passenger seat.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but so there was just a video today on Twitter. I forget the name of the channel. But somebody just did a video where he was talking about the Lucid, and he was with the GT version that's supposed to have 517 miles of range. And he said he couldn't drive it because it's a release candidate. And I'm like, well,
yeah, that's what I keep saying. Yeah.
So Mercedes let Marcus Brownlee and at least 2 German journalists, maybe it's more than that. They let Marcus Brownlee take the car.
Yeah, yeah.
Take it for a couple days.
Yeah.
So I don't think Mercedes is planning to deliver a car until 2022. Am I wrong? I think they're calling it a 20. Yeah, the EQS. Yeah. The EQS is not going to be delivered to customers. And this guy in this video today, he said he was riding in the passenger seat. They had it in like comfort mode, and he felt like it was 80% there. Like, what? Wait, this is a car that the CEO said in February they were going to deliver to customers before the end of June.
So one of their engineers told me 2.5, 3 weeks ago that it's about 90% there. And we couldn't believe it. I was like, this is, a release candidate, like, they keep calling it. Also, they said, oh, this has been, we skip bins, and, because I looked at the bin. And yeah, there's a lot of weird things going on there. But no, and by the way, when you say EPA range, I think that, if they're even able to do that, and again, I haven't driven it because no one outside the company has. But I don't think, they may get that rating somehow, but in maybe cold weather, I don't think that their BMS is at all where it should be. I don't think they're hiring the right people for that. I think that just their thermal management specifically, I've heard is horrible.
I'm going to say this. Lucid will never sell a car. This is my opinion. They will never sell it. Yeah. They cannot deliver the claims on the promises that they made. And so they can't release a car, because if they release a car and let a journalist drive it, the journalist will be able to say, wow, this thing isn't anywhere close to what they promised. As compared to Marcus Brownlee and the Germans driving the EQS, hey, this isn't as fast as a Tesla, but this is a pretty good ride, right? They were generally impressed with the EQS, even though, not the same performance as a Tesla Model S, but still not bad. Okay. So, but here's why I brought that up. When you refer to like Waymo or some company in China that's operating a self-driving car, and you say, well, they're doing it. Like, okay, but Lucid says, I get in arguments all the time with what I call Lucid trolls, who accuse me of being unfair to Lucid because I'm critical of the company. And I'm like, well, look, they say all this. They have tremendously positive media coverage from 2-Bit Da Vinci, from Ben Sullins, from Transport Evolved. There's all these people coming and saying, oh, Lucid's for real. They're producing cars in this factory. I think it's all a lie. And this is the problem is I think there are companies out there that are complete and total frauds. This was just the accusation that was just made against QuantumScape. We know about Theranos. There are companies that pull shams.
What do you think of Rivian?
I don't know enough about Rivian. I was actually going to ask you about Rivian. What do you think about Rivian? Because I honestly don't know enough about Rivian.
Rivian is real. I mean, we were talking to Rivian before they exited shadow mode. So like before, these people could even post, their what company they worked for on LinkedIn. And it was really cool to see, them evolve, especially, really with that Amazon investment. A good sign is, now they actually have a battery contract, and it wasn't just, LG Chem. It was interesting that they abandoned LG Chem, but
Lucid has a battery contract.
Yeah, no, but for this, an actual purchase agreement.
Does Rivian have a delivery date?
Yeah, they're targeting Q4, even late Q3
this year.
This year. And I speak to people at Rivian often,
and I've
heard so many different answers. So I don't know that. I don't think they really know the timing.
But they've let people drive the trucks.
Oh yeah, there's a whole documentary pretty much on it. Long way up. Very, very good.
Okay, so let me turn this back to Lidar though.
Sure.
So if we agree that there are companies that are arguably close to fraud, then the fact that some company says they've got self-driving cars operating, and I say, for all we know, they're using remote drivers, you can't know they're not doing it. It doesn't scale if you're using remote drivers.
So here's something. I used to have people, when you would take a picture of a Tesla when you saw one because it was so rare. And when even AP1, when I had a car with AP1, I would, give people rides all the time, and I would just not shut up about it. And I didn't even know, enough about it. There was even a point where I can't believe I'm admitting this, but there was actually a point where I told a person or two that my car had Lidar. I just didn't know, I just hear these terms. This is, really, really early on. And so, as I learned more about it, they say, where, the fleet learning. So the car will, if you set it to, high, for the suspension, like you're coming out of there's a pothole or something, or you're coming out of a car wash. You can set that on high on, whatever, and it will remember that location and automatically raise it there. And they, Tesla kind of played around with the words there, but they said, fleet learning. And so, but then I got into other people's Teslas, and, the cars weren't raising up. So, but I was telling people, because I truly believed it. I thought that, the whole fleet does this. And it's the same thing, early on, like what data, that's what everyone says about Tesla. I guess some people are maybe a little misinformed there. Those cars, the Tesla is not just sending, my entire drive back, it's not uploading that. First of all, that would be incredibly expensive. There are 1.3 million vehicle Teslas on the road with hardware 2, 2.5, and 3. So that just doesn't make sense. So what Tesla actually has to do, you mentioned this earlier, I just want to kind of get back to it, is if they want, let's say that they're looking, the Tesla example, for a bicycle on the back of a car, and they want to ask the fleet to send them images, cases of, and this is where we talk about edge case. People say that Tesla can just ask the fleet to send it, or that it's neural net can look at, and this is generative adversarial network scans. It's actually a pretty relatively new thing for ML, but Tesla does employ that. But if you want to basically ask the fleet for that, you have to specifically, you can't do that after the fact, by the way. You have to say in the future now, look for this, and then you have to oftentimes you have to wait for that car to connect to Wi-Fi. You know, they're not going to, that'd be so expensive to send over cellular. But, you know, it doesn't mean that they can just ask the entire fleet. They have to hand pick and pretty much guess. I actually know people who work in that part of, you know, friends that just happen to be, you know, hired by Tesla that work in that, and they're data labelers. And so I know the process well. And the fact that Tesla even relies on human data labelers still not super great.
Oh wait, what's the better way?
Well, so first of all, a lot of companies have simulators that are pretty advanced. And I don't think that, you know, simulated miles or simulated, you know.
No. What's the better way than data labelers? How else would you train? I mean, George Hotz has a different approach. Are you saying that George Hotz's approach is better with Comma.ai?
I mean, but he's also just working on a level 2 system. You know, he's not working on level.
No, but you're saying that using human data labelers is a problem, which I think they are
it's
eventually
hard to
hoping.
scale. Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's the whole point about going to the 4D system, is that it makes the data labelers much more efficient because they don't have to look at 8 images at the same time. They look at a 3D video representation, and it makes it a lot, they're able to be much more effective at doing the labeling. But I mean, what's the alternative that you think is better than having humans label real world data? Do you think the better alternative is to do simulations only? How is machine learning supposed to train the cars to drive if you don't do this?
Well, so first of all, having a constant stream with even a much smaller subset of cars, that's, you know, seems to work. Pony AI,
wait.
AI does this.
So you mean
have no human data labelers?
So you mean having a constant stream of the car driving down an interstate highway with nothing happening is better than identifying situations where the software is having trouble and learning from those situations?
So again, you know, now, by the way, the FSD beta testers, it's different because they are seeing on their home Wi-Fi's, you know, they're tracking it huge, you know, even after a 30-minute drive, you know, a 10 gigabyte, you know, upload from their car to seemingly Tesla's servers. So they are, you know, for disengagements, and there's even a button that you can press, not the button, but.
Let me just pause you for a second because I've seen a couple comments I want to argue with, including from my friend Bruce. George Hotz has a theory with Comma.ai that you don't label at all, that you don't use human labeling at all, that the software learns based on what it sees and it has something that it's optimizing, and over time it learns based totally on what it sees, and it basically learns to label itself in ways that we don't necessarily understand. So there is a way of doing this, at least arguably, and I like George Hotz. I think he's possibly wrong, but George Hotz advances this theory, and I can't say he's wrong, that it is possible to do it without human labelers. But I'm trying to get clear from Taylor. Are you saying that the Comma.ai approach is better, or are you saying there's some other approach that doesn't use human labeling that's better?
Yeah, there are other approaches. And by the way, you know, I'm a big fan of Hotz. You know, back in when I would jailbreak, you know, my phone and stuff. You know, I've followed him for a long time, and he's a character. But you know, his approach, you know, it's unique. I don't know of anyone doing it quite like for just the you know, labeled annotation part the same way. And you know, and his neural net is actually you know, it's pretty clever how he's doing it. Again, he's doing a level 2 system with, you know, you literally plug your phone into a 3D.
It's one camera.
Yeah, it's a smartphone camera. So, and it's very clever. But yeah, but there are definitely other approaches for labeling. And I'm just saying that, you know, I would like to see if Tesla were to.
So you mentioned the companies. You mentioned some company in China that's doing this. That's actually got
everyone. Yeah.
So what method is that company used to train the software to drive?
Did they use software or to?
You described that there's a company in China that's doing, or more than one company in China that's doing level 5 robotaxi driving without. My story is that they're using remote drivers. You're saying that they're doing it. So what method did they use to develop this?
Yeah, I mean, well, so there are different approaches. There are quite a few companies in China that already have robotaxis.
Is there a market leader in China that's doing this well?
Yeah, I tend to say, I mean, I think AutoX right now.
Okay, so what method did AutoX use to train its software to drive without a human controlling it?
So they have a really interesting GAN. So basic, are you familiar with GANs?
No.
So I think 2018, 2017, this, the head of Apple's machine learning, division, he was not drunk, I don't think, but he was at a bar and had a pint of beer and came up with this crazy thing that has kind of revolutionized neural nets. And basically what it is it's like a game. And so a generative adversarial network. And so you take the classic example is photos of cats. And so you take a bunch of, you show the system a bunch of photos of cats and real photos of cats. And then it tries to, understand, okay, this is a cat. And then you have to tell it, this is not a cat. This is, this is a dog or this is a horse.
So you have to use human labelers.
Well, no, you actually just have to show it a bunch of photos and then you try to start fooling it. And you slip in, a photo of not a cat. And then if it gets it right, after you can kind of tell it, yes, like, this is how you scored. But what he did is he said, okay, so we basically have a discriminator that's the one that's trying to, it's been trained on this. And then it's trying to discern if this is actually a picture of a real cat or not. That had been done before. But what this system did is it basically, while the system is labeling, or while the system is learning from this stuff, it's also trying to produce its own images, and it tries to fool basically the opponents. And so what that does is it makes the whole system better. And you don't have to have nearly as much input data. And so with having a neural net understand handwritten digits, you can show it. Before this, you had to feed it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, tons and tons of different examples of these handwritten digits. And so you would have to feed it about 100,000 different data points for it to train, to a 99% accuracy rate in identifying, yes, this is a 9, this is a 4, and so on. With a generative adversarial network, though, it only took less than 100 input of labeled, annotated data. And so it's a huge thing for.
So you're saying there's this algorithm that this company AutoX is using an algorithm.
I'm saying that you asked that specific company. Yeah, that's how that
they're using a generative adversarial network, and that is able to learn to drive using a lot less data.
Yeah, a lot less input. Yeah, and then it's simulator. I mean, I could talk all about the simulator, but yeah, so it's a different approach. And then
so does this generative adversarial network that AutoX is using, it identifies objects that it sees and it predicts where they're going to move?
Yeah, well, so their path prediction and trajectory prediction method is, I mean, obviously it's definitely based on that. But yeah, it does a lot more things. So like
so you're basically what you're saying is where Tesla has needed billions of miles to learn to drive, AutoX has done this with some algorithm that Andrej Karpathy is not capable of figuring out, and they've been able to do it with a lot less data.
He uses GANs. He uses.
But you're saying they're able to do it with less data than Andrej Karpathy is able.
They're more reliant on real world data, and
who is
that Tesla is.
Well, so you're saying that AutoX is successful because they just did a high volume of simulations and the simulated data was enough to get them past it without needing as much real world data.
Yeah, kind of. And the thing is, how can we quantify this? Well, you can actually sit in an AutoX in the back seat and there's no driver and it can take you around. And you can't do that with a Tesla. I can't even do that in a parking lot.
You can't know that it doesn't have a remote driver.
Okay, I mean,
how many vehicles is AutoX running like this?
Well, so in Shanghai they still have safety drivers. In Shenzhen, in the Pingshan district, they removed safety drivers.
How many cars?
I think like 50 is last month.
Why haven't they scaled?
They are. No, they're just getting started. Then there's Baidu Apollo program that has.
When did they start doing this?
I think late November is when you could actually maybe early December, you could actually, like on your app, summon it.
Okay, so describe the car that they're using.
I mean, it has Lidar, it has radar, it has cameras.
No, I mean, is it a Chinese car? Is it a BMW? Is it a Jaguar?
Oh yeah. No, I think they use Pacifica minivans, similar. Yeah, same. I think it's the same car.
They have those in China?
Yeah.
Okay. So they have Lidar on top of the car?
Yeah, they also have other cars. Yeah, they have a lot of them.
So how much does that Lidar thing cost? How much does that car cost?
If you were to buy it,
everything. How much does it cost them? How much does it cost them to have that car? Is it like $100,000? Is it more than $100,000?
The ones in Shenzhen are a bit different than in Shanghai, but so the ones in Shenzhen, those are probably with all the knowing what Lidar they use, plus the cost of the actual vehicle. That's the part that I actually don't know how much that car actually costs. It could be like 40,000, could be like 60. I have no idea. But the hardware that they use, that's another probably $45,000 of hardware.
So is it a ballpark $100,000 vehicle when you add everything together?
Yeah, I would actually say it's a little bit more.
Okay, so let's call it 100 because that's an easier number to work with.
Sure.
How many miles do you think this thing is going to last? Is this good for 100,000 miles? Is it good for 200,000 miles? How many miles will this vehicle last?
Well, that's up to the car and the tires.
I know,
but yeah,
and how long will the Lidar last?
Well, like Lidar doesn't really kick out.
Is this isn't the solid state Lidar, right? This is some other Lidar.
They use both.
No, but the thing on the top of the car, on the top of the Pacifica, that's not a solid state Lidar. That's some big heavy thing that uses a lot of battery.
One's not. But they have, I think, 4 solid state Lidars.
So let me try it this way. Instead of questioning you this way, I'm just going to say this: if the vehicle only lasts 100,000 miles,
well, I don't know why the Lidar. Say that.
I know you didn't say that. I'm trying to get you a number.
I don't know why anyone would say that.
You wouldn't give me a number, so I'm going to work with my number. If you want to give me a different number, we can work with your number. You didn't give me a number, so I'm going to say the vehicle's only good for 100,000 miles. If it costs $100,000, it's $1 a mile just for the depreciation on the car.
I mean, a minivan is, I don't know why this is even relevant, but a minivan is, they put serious mileage on. So I'm guessing it's, I've never owned a minivan, but probably 400,000 miles, 300,000 miles.
Okay. So that would finish. So 400,000 miles. So 400,000 miles is 25 cents a mile. If you don't use any interest rate, $100,000 at 400,000 miles is 25 cents a mile in the depreciation alone, right? Sure. Probably a little more than that when you use an interest rate or something else.
Yeah.
You probably get to 30 cents a mile. And then how much electricity does it use per mile?
So they don't release any of their consumption.
I think you would probably agree with me that the cost of operating this vehicle ends up being more than 50 cents a mile. When you add in electricity, when you add in maintenance, when you add in other things, the cost of operating this vehicle is probably going to be more than 50 cents a mile. Would you agree with that roughly?
No.
So give me a number.
I
think we've already agreed it's probably in the ballpark of 30 cents just for depreciation. Right? So you only need 20 cents.
If that's how you want to put. I mean, so probably per mile, I mean, if we can do kilometer, but per mile, it would be about what. So for the thing is, we don't know anything about their insurance. I also, we just have to guess for that specific company, the cleaning cost. I think what we have is like in miles, it'd be like 41 cents.
So it's 30 cents for the depreciation plus 11 cents for everything else.
I mean, that's your depreciation.
Well, okay, but 400,000 miles, $100,000. You said it was more than $100,000. I gave you the $100,000 to make it simpler. At $100,000 and 400,000 miles, you're at 25 cents a mile, but you have to include some kind of interest rate and some other kind of discounting in order to get there. I think 30 cents a mile is pretty reasonable. If we go to $150,000 for the car, I mean, I don't know where your number is on the car. I could easily push it to 40 cents a mile for depreciation if we play games with the numbers. I don't think 30 cents is unreasonable.
Okay, sure, but
here's the problem with that. Here's why I'm going here. Yeah. So in 2019, both Elon Musk and a company called Testloop said that the cost of operating a Model 3, including depreciation at high volume usage before it was a 1 million mile vehicle, which it may or may not be now, was 18 cents a mile. So if AutoX is operating a vehicle that costs 40 or 50 cents a mile, and Tesla in 2019 produced a vehicle that was capable of operating at 18 cents a mile, and the future Tesla vehicles that are coming will be at 10 cents a mile or less, then AutoX is going to be real trouble in the competitive marketplace. If they're not, if their self-driving is real.
Okay, so I mean, yeah,
what part did I get wrong there?
So, well, first of all, the test loop data, that's, I mean, ARK Invest even has tried to break this out, and they've released it publicly, and to try to understand the cleaning costs, the insurance costs, depreciation, charging, and when you remove obviously the human driver, obviously that's the biggest chunk, and so I think it's more comparable to look at. I think it's fair to compare what Test Loop is doing. That's a human driver, obviously. There's actually one that's called Bound that goes from Boston to.
Let me be clear. The Test Loop number was not including the human driver, because I believe the human driver was actually paying to drive the car. If I remember how the Test Loop situation worked correctly, you would pay for the ride and one person would be the driver. I may be wrong. Maybe they actually had a human driver in the car that was a Test Loop employee. I thought they set it up.
Definitely not a Tesla employee, but.
No. Test Loop. There's a company called Test Loop that was operating. They were operating this thing where you would go from like Santa Barbara to Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and Las Vegas to San Diego, and San Diego to Santa Barbara. And they were running high mileage vehicles. They were getting a lot of miles out of their vehicles. And they estimated that, leaving out the cost of a human driver, they estimated the operating cost of the vehicle at 18 cents a mile. And that was before you had a 1,000,000-mile battery, which Tesla arguably has, especially with LFP. That was before you had front and rear castings and structural battery pack. That was before you had LFP cells, because they didn't have LFP cells. So the cost of making a car with LFP cells is less. So my gut hunch is that a Model 3 or Model Y coming out of Shanghai right now, probably with LFP, probably has an operating cost close to 10 cents a mile already, leaving out the human. So where are my numbers wrong?
So, well, first of all, I think that you can do just annually, how much instead of per mile. If we want to just go on have some assumptions here, if you say, let's just say that, because there actually is, a vehicle in China that has a very interesting system that, I think will be the business model that everyone is watching very closely for autonomous vehicles going forward. You have, let's say, I think we have in miles, it'd be like 110,000 miles a year that these vehicles may travel. And then you have, the cost of the actual vehicle itself. Then you have the cleaning cost, in this case, in the early stages, the human driver, it's a very similar thing to what Test Loop is doing, and what Bound is doing. There are a few other companies. And also I think Test Loop has the highest range Tesla in the world. And that's nowhere near 1,000,000 miles, and it's, I think, needed 2 new batteries. But I agree with LFP. The cyclability is a lot longer, and obviously Tesla doesn't make an LFP battery, but so at annualized for a full year cycle, the operating cost is on that vehicle is about.
Wait a second. The Pacifica that they're driving, that AutoX is driving, is that electric?
I'm not talking about AutoX.
No, but let's go back to AutoX for a second. Was that an electric vehicle?
No, Pacifica, I don't think. Actually, no, they do make I think a plug-in hybrid.
The AutoX vehicle that's operating in Shenzhen with 50 vehicles that doesn't have a human driver, are those electric vehicles or are those gas-powered vehicles?
No, those are gas-powered.
So their cost per mile is going to be a lot higher than an electric vehicle, right?
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me on this?
Yes.
Okay. Their cost, no, of course that cost is going to be higher. Yeah, I'm not talking about AutoX.
Well, we were talking about AutoX before, and we were making this comparison. It's something you said triggered that in me. When I was agreeing to your 11 cents a mile on top of the 30 cents a mile, there's no way you're getting 11 cents a mile operating cost outside of depreciation on a gas-powered vehicle. You're way over 50 cents a mile on your AutoX car.
No.
There's no way you can make those numbers work, Taylor. There's no way you can make those numbers work.
Let's just look at it annually.
How do you make that work? How many miles does it drive a year?
Well, let's just say, again, I'm not even talking about that car. But this car that I am talking about is electric. And that, let's just say 110,000 miles per year. And
let's use 100 because that's easy. Okay, that's an easier number to work with. I love it.
My number is going to be a little off, but
I love her oversimplifying with 100,000. Well, go with your 110 if it works for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. And this car that I'm talking about is called D1, and it was a joint venture product between BYD and Didi Chuxing. Didi Chuxing does more. It's a massive ride-hailing company in China, significantly bigger than Uber and Lyft in terms of rides per day. And so this vehicle right now has a human driver, but as Didi releases its, and I think you would actually really like, you'd find studying this specific vehicle very fascinating, because they're planning on having 100,000 of these vehicles just this year on the road. And so with
100,000 human drivers.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, actually, so we say 2.3 drivers per vehicle, because these cars are actually being driven around the clock. 3 shifts per day, and then we figure up to 4 hours for charging, eating, going to the bathroom. And so that vehicle, sure, 100,000 miles in a year across, however many drivers, but that's single vehicle, is that the cost, all the costs combined on that vehicle are, I think for that it's $14,000. The cost to actually produce that car is roughly $9,000. They sell it for about $16,000. This is all in US dollars.
This is a $9,000 car.
Yeah, it's a cost. Yeah, the cost.
How big is this thing?
It's definitely smaller than a minivan, but it kind of looks like a minivan. They're like lime green, and you can look it up. It's like the size of, I guess, a Jeep, you can kind of say, wheelbase wise, but this is a dedicated ride-hailing car. And so that the $9,000 cost, obviously you only recognize that once every 6 years. In China, you have to take the vehicle off after 6 years. That's a lot. And so then, but the revenue on that vehicle is upwards of $76,000. And so the operating cost
a year.
Yeah, every year. Yeah.
How do you get that number?
You should see our model on it.
110,000 miles. Is it charging $1 a mile, or is it charging in some other revenue model? What's the revenue model?
The passenger. So BYD actually produces the vehicle. Didi basically just puts it onto its platform.
Wait, no. You gave me a number, $76,000 a year in revenue for the car. Yeah. That's ride-hailing revenue, right?
That's revenue for the entire product. So that's how much the driver's getting paid on top of how much. So BYD gets 30 cents per.
Okay. So the passengers collectively are paying $76,000 a year for this car, which drives 110,000 miles?
Yeah.
Okay, and what percentage of those miles have a passenger in them versus are empty?
So that utilization rate in China, the utilization rate's around, they say 58%, but between 50 and 62%.
Okay, so for 55,
this one will be operating at night as well. So
for 60,000 miles, you're getting $76,000 in revenue.
Yeah.
So you're getting more than $1 a mile in revenue.
So BYD alone, it's like a royalty kind of system. They get 30 cents every kilometer it carries.
I'm just talking about what the passengers are paying. Oh. The passengers are paying more than $1 a mile to ride in this $9,000 car.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this thing crash worthy?
Is it what?
Crash worthy.
Yeah. This thing's been crash tested.
Okay.
Zero vehicle fires. Yeah. No, it's a very safe.
Because let me just say this: if they've come up with a $9,000 car that can be produced for $9,000, that they can sell anywhere in the world and that will meet U.S. crash standards.
They sell it for $16,000.
They can sell it for $16,000 and it meets U.S. crash test standards. Why isn't it here already?
Where?
I want one.
I did too, believe me. Yeah.
Why isn't it? I mean, this is fantastic. Why aren't they making these things by the millions?
By the way, this is my Twitter photo. So there's a reason.
Okay, so
a lot of
people ask me about BYD. So what you're telling me is BYD is meant. Wait, it's an electric vehicle. How big is the battery pack?
The battery pack, I think, is 55 kilowatt hours.
How much does it cost? What kind of battery is it using? LFP or?
It uses Blade battery, so it's an LFP made by BYD.
So because BYD has the Blade battery, okay. So 55 kilowatt hours. How much does it cost per kilowatt hour for the batteries at the cell level?
Well, so at the pack level.
At the cell level, I asked.
At the cell level, it's around 74. The pack level, it's 83 US dollars per kilowatt hour. So the battery pack advantage when you make your own.
So the battery pack alone is close to $5,000.
Yeah.
And it only costs them $9,000. So they spend $4,000 making the rest of the vehicle.
Yes.
Okay. Do you see why that doesn't sound credible?
They're selling the car for $16,000.
Do you see why it doesn't sound credible that you can make a car with a $5,000 battery pack and only spend $4,000 more making the rest of the car?
Well,
Why some people would have trouble believing that?
Well, I mean, there are plenty of EVs that 40%, up to 40% of the cost of manufacturing the car is in the battery alone, and everything that comes with it. So the BMS and.
All right. So
Yeah.
so people have told me before this interview, some people said, Warren, ask him about BYD, because apparently you're a big believer in BYD. So is this the main reason you're a big believer in BYD, or is there something else about it that we should know?
This product excites me a lot. BYD BYD excites me a lot more in terms of just growth potential than Tesla. Tesla's obviously led the way. And BYD is a battery maker at heart that also produces electric vehicles. And they make electric buses, they make electric dump trucks, they make all types. They're the only automaker in the world that makes its own batteries. They're also the only automaker in the world that makes its own chips. So these are facts.
They're the only battery maker in the world that makes its own batteries until sometime this year.
As of right now, yeah, they still are. And
Okay.
they have been since they were started in '95. They bought defunct company in 2003. So so they, that's how their costs are so low. If 20 to 40%, depending on the vehicle, of the cost of goods sold is in the battery and chips alone, right there, if you're doing that in-house, it's a huge cost advantage.
Okay, sorry. How much of the cost of this $9,000 cost is chips?
In that car, it's probably $300 to $400.
Okay, so are these chips like better than the Tesla's FSD version chip that's in your car?
Oh no, I'm talking about those are the autonomous, the chip for the autonomous driving system. I'm talking about the chips that there's a global shortage of.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out the cost of the car. If you said it was $1,000 worth of chips, then all of a sudden we only got $3,000 left to make the rest of the car. But no, you're saying that BYD is a great growth story. I want to ask you about Tesla's growth story in a minute, but tell me what BYD's growth story is. I get it. They make their own batteries, they make their own chips, they make their own cars. I honestly have a generally favorable impression of BYD. I don't know enough. Andre Bell's in the chat. He thinks they're great. What's the growth story though?
Yeah. So, a lot of people only know it as Warren Buffett, bought 9.9%, Berkshire Hathaway did, of BYD. But there's a lot more to it. So for BYD, just as a battery maker alone, that's very compelling. And so once you make the battery, then you can also, they're selling that battery to, externally. Just what Tesla says, eventually it wants to do with 4680. And so they also make their own chips that they're now selling externally. They don't have obviously a chip shortage right now because they make their own. But they've partnered with Toyota. They've partnered with, they have battery contracts.
Taylor, What's the growth story? I don't care if they partner with Toyota. What's the
Well,
growth?
so they're a battery maker. They're a battery maker, and they're also they have a platform that other companies, similar to the Rivian skateboard, other companies can basically make a car on their same platform. And so you know,
So Toyota is going to start making electric vehicles using BYD's platform.
yes.
Does Toyota know this?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Why is Toyota not talking more about this? Because I haven't heard this from
They are,
Toyota.
of course they
I've
are.
heard Toyota talking about hybrids and fuel cells, and I'm trying to figure this out. Why wouldn't Toyota do its own solution?
I don't think. I mean, they went hydrogen for probably too long. They spent billions of dollars on that, and then they realized that, hey, that's not the right approach. So, and you know, years ago, I actually asked BYD who their number one competitor is, and they said Toyota. So now they're actually partnering. I think that's a good sign. But they've partnered with Ford in China. BYD's producing the batteries for the Mach-E that will be sold in China. You know, so they're kind of like a Magna as well. They have their own car seat company. They make almost every single component except for the tires and, you know, a few other smaller components in that vehicle. And so, you know, the thing is, their brand is not very strong in China because there's, you know, cheaper vehicles with poorer build quality.
You mean like $9,000 cars that are $5,300 worth of batteries and $3,700 for the rest of the car?
Yeah, I mean that.
I can't imagine why.
Know it as
I can't imagine why somebody would think that's cheap. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely.
So
it's definitely
when you're
cheap.
saying that consumers have a negative are hearing these things about Tesla, it sounds like consumers are hearing negative things about BYD, but that's not a problem for BYD, but it's a problem for Tesla.
It doesn't have a super strong brand. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, because I have a positive impression of the Blade battery. Just to be clear,
Yeah,
I actually have a positive impression of that, but I'm still not hearing the growth story. So let me step away from that for a second and let me ask you about Tesla's growth story.
Okay.
How many vehicles do you see Tesla producing or delivering, let's say, this year?
So this year, well, in November, we had Tesla at 953,000 units. I'm gonna have to lower that. You know, I think 800. Well, our number is 868,000.
Okay, you're not far off of me. I'm at 930. So they delivered 184.
Yep.
At least 2,000 of which were not produced this year. I think. Yeah. What do you think they'll do? In order to get to my 900 number, I'm basically saying they're going to do over 200,000 in quarter 2, and then somewhere between quarter 3 and quarter 4, they're going to start hitting 250,000 vehicles a quarter. Like quarter 4 might be 250,000 vehicles. Yep. Do you think they can manage 250,000 vehicles in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I think. You know, I don't have a lot of cars coming out of Berlin and Austin.
Same here.
I think Austin's further ahead. I have Austin starting, you know, actual production late summer, so mid to late August, which, you know, that's.
I think we can agree very few deliveries from those two factories in the third quarter, and maybe some in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
Right. So I still get them to 900,000 plus because I think Shanghai is still growing. Fremont is going to improve a little bit. And then I think model wise, they're going to start coming out of Berlin and Texas in the fourth quarter. And that's going to be enough to put them over 900,000, but we're close there. So then what do you see for 2022?
For just deliveries or?
Production deliveries, however you want to do it. For Tesla vehicles in 2022. Now Berlin and Austin are both running.
So again, this is from November, but we have it at 1.56 million.
Okay, so that's a pretty good growth story, isn't it? To go from 500,000 in 2020 to 1.5 million in 2022. So let me give you my growth story, and you tell me what I've got wrong. Okay. I think ultimately the Model 3 and Model Y factories in Berlin and Texas collectively, I'm not saying the distribution between 3 and Y, but 3s and Ys together from each factory are 2 million vehicles a year. That together, Berlin produces 2 million Model 3s and Model Ys, and Texas produces 2 million Model 3s and Model Ys. Texas starts producing Cybertrucks in some volume. Between Texas Cybertruck, Fremont and Shanghai, you get another 2 million vehicles a year. And this is somewhere around the end of 2023 into 2024. They're producing 6 million vehicles from those 4 locations without getting into, and you could throw in a little semi and a little roadster if you want to, but those are trivial numbers. Without getting into the 2023 compact, I see those 4 factories, those 4 locations producing 6 million 3s, Ys, Cybertrucks, S's and X's, and Roadsters, and a couple other things.
In 2022?
No. That's by going in. I'm trying to get to the future, because I think 2022 is 2 million vehicles, but I don't think we're that far off with your 1.5 million. I'm just saying where the growth story is for me with Tesla is you get to 6 million vehicles out of those 4, not counting the 2023 compact that they hinted at from Battery Day that will be using LFP cells. So does that 6 million sound too optimistic? And if I'm too optimistic, and I'm saying, let's say 2024, those 4 factories together produce 6 million of those vehicles. How far off am I and why?
So I think that 2 million out of each of those factories, even capacity, that's
what's the holdup in the capacity?
Well, I mean, they just can't. That's not even in their plan. Their plan right now is 500,000 units out of both of those factories. I mean, the biggest factory in the world, what is it?
Okay, let me
Wolfsburg. That was only like 860,000 units.
Okay, I think we agree that Tesla is trying to advance manufacturing technology ahead of what Volkswagen does.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me explain where I got my number.
Okay.
They're planning to have 8 gigapresses in the beginning, at least, for Model Y in Berlin. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
4 gigapresses for the front, 4 gigapresses for the rear. You with me so far?
Yep.
Okay. My impression is that each gigapress will put out 1,000 pieces a day. Okay, which is 250,000 pieces a year if they operate for only 250 out of 360 days. Times 4 is 1 million. That's just Model Y. What do I have wrong in that? And so that's how many.
Well, that factory is dedicated to just Model Y right now.
Right, but I'm just saying I see that Model Y factory producing enough castings to supply 1 million vehicles for Model Y alone. That's before you put in gigapresses for the Model 3 that they'll be producing later. Do you see something wrong with that analysis that the gigapresses alone could produce?
Just from the gigapresses? I mean,
that the gigapresses could produce that many castings. There may be other bottlenecks, but on the gigapresses, they would be able to produce that much. Do you? I mean, you understand that the gigapresses produce those castings in a very, very small amount of time, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're brilliant. Yeah.
So 250 a day, 1,000 a day, I don't think is a stretch, because 1,000 a day is about 50 an hour. So it's a little bit more than 1 a minute, or a little bit less than 1 a minute.
Yeah, that's what it's maybe capable of. But
that's for only 250 days a year. That's assuming it's down a third of the year, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I'm at least in the ballpark. I'm at least in the ballpark of 1 million a year on the gigapresses alone.
Okay.
Now I can understand there might be other bottlenecks. I think your position might be they can't produce the batteries, right?
Yeah, and there are a lot of competitors at that point.
Well, competitors don't affect production. Competitors affect deliveries.
Right. And they're not going to produce significantly more than they plan to deliver.
Okay, but if they're able to do front and rear castings and eliminate 600 robots, and they're going to do structural battery pack, and they're going to get cell costs down, then they're going to be able to deliver a Model Y, especially if they do a Model Y with LFP cells in cylindrical format, which maybe you think is impossible. I'm telling you, it's for real.
It's not possible.
What?
It's not impossible. No.
Okay, so if they're able to do that, their cost of making a Model Y is going to be stunningly low for a vehicle that will do 1 million miles at incredibly low cost per mile for the owner. Right? I mean, what part of the story do I have wrong? I think what you're saying is there isn't enough demand for Tesla to be able to sell 2 million 3s and Ys.
I'm not even saying that. I'm saying that there are other things that you have to consider. And one of the main thing for me, yes, is batteries. I'm just saying that just because a factory, if it's operating 18 hours a day, then it can produce that many units. I get how you're arriving to your numbers, but obviously there's a lot more analysis.
Okay, so the battery challenge is they've said they're going to have 200 gigawatt hours of capacity for 2022 and produce 100 gigawatt hours of their own cells. And Drew Baglino said they were ahead of schedule at the Q4 call. I have two sources that tell me they're ahead of schedule. One source told me they're 30% ahead of their schedule. That they're going to, and the point is that when they get Fremont to a certain level of production of these cells, thank you, Jared, for your support. When they get to a certain level of production of the cells at Fremont, then they will export that model and produce the same lines in Berlin and in Texas, and I think in Shanghai as well, although they haven't said that they're going to do them in Shanghai. And they're going to start producing those batteries in volume. And if you produce 100 gigawatt hours of these cells, and each vehicle uses 50 kilowatt hours, right? That's just the high nickel cells, which really aren't going to this. If they buy, so CATL has announced plans to massive.
You think average pack size 50 kilowatt hours for their highest performance vehicle?
No, I'm using it for a simple number. I'm not saying that's the number. I think the question is, what's their supply of cells in the big limiting factor? If I can tout my friend Jordan Giesege's channel, the limiting factor is cell production. So if they're able to produce 100 gigawatt hours of their own cells in 2022, and then they buy 100 plus gigawatt hours of cells from suppliers, and CATL has specifically said they are scaling up LFP production very, very large. I think they're going for 1.2 terawatt hours in 2025 or 26.
Yeah, but that's for a lot. I mean, they're supplying like everyone. So there's no.
Who's their biggest customer?
Their biggest customer right now is Tesla.
Okay, so if you're making these cells and Tesla says we're going to pay you good money for those cells, wouldn't you keep selling to Tesla in volume?
Yeah, of course, but there are also
who's the next biggest customer they're going to have?
BAIC.
Is BYD going to buy cells from CATL?
No, that'd be very weird for a battery maker to buy cells from another battery maker. So no, of course not. But no, I think so. With 40, obviously, I want, as a Tesla investor, I want Teslas to make more cells in house. And I think that a high nickel, I totally agree with you on iron phosphate cathode. I think that, even let's say like, if we want to jump to 2030, even at that point, with what models are planned and with what we project, we don't think that there will be 20 million. But in 2030, if they were to sell 20 million vehicles, which is Tesla's stated goal for 2030, only about a third of that would be from 46A. It's actually less. So that would require not from energy storage, not from external supply, external sales. That would just be just under 1.5 terawatt hours.
Okay, I just want to be clear with you because we talked about some numbers before. I want to mention this before I forget it. So what I'm proposing is that Tesla is going to produce 100 gigawatt hours of batteries in 2022, which is what they said and what I've heard they're ahead of schedule.
They're going to, or that's installed.
They're going to produce. No, they're going to have 200 gigawatt hours of capacity. They're going to produce 100 gigawatt hours of cells, and at ballpark, they're going to buy 100 gigawatt hours of cells from suppliers. So that's 200 gigawatt hours of cells. By my numbers, that's enough cells for 4 million vehicles at 50 kilowatt hours per vehicle. But I'm going to agree with you. The average might be higher than 50. Maybe it's 60 or 70 kilowatt hour packs, but it's 4 million at 50, right? And I'm only saying they're going to hit 2 million in 2022. You're saying 1.5 million. But when you get out to 2024, where I'm calling the 6 million number, I'm saying the volume of cell production. So in other words, for the 2022 number where I say 2 million, are you okay?
Yeah, sorry. These things just keep dying. I'm alternating them out.
Okay. So for the 2022 number where I say 2 million and you're saying there's not enough, I think you're maybe saying there's not enough battery capacity for 2 million vehicles in 2022. If they have a total of 200 gigawatt hours and their average pack size is 50, I agree it's bigger than that. You have enough for 4 million vehicles. You would need an average pack size of 100 to limit them to a million, to limit it to 2 million vehicles. And I think we can agree the average pack size will be less than 100 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, of course. Oh yeah.
So they're going to have enough cells to do 2 million vehicles.
But that's assuming that they can somehow scale. I mean, it's the same thing with Tesla's claiming that it can do robotaxis, but there are companies that actually are doing robotaxis. Just the same thing, there's a reason that there's only one automaker in the entire world that produces batteries in general. It's very difficult. Scaling batteries is not like scaling. You can ask anyone in the battery business. It's not like scaling, auto facilities. They're very difficult to scale, and you can't just jump right into it. So again,
you're in that space again where it's like saying that tell me again something Elon can't do. He can't land orbital rocket boosters. He can't build a chip that can read a monkey's mind to move things. You can keep telling me things Elon can't do, and we can keep agreeing that Elon keeps doing stuff he's not supposed to be able to do.
He's been running an electric vehicle company for over a decade, and he hasn't been able to produce any cells for that. He hasn't tried yet. Greatest cause.
He hasn't tried. He just started trying. They just figured out that's what we need to do.
No, he is trying.
Wait. Sorry. When did he try before this current effort?
So that they've had pilot lines, lab level pilot lines for years. A lot of companies do this. Volkswagen has been doing this. Most automakers that have committed before 2017 to having really electrifying their fleet. BMW just the last second. They have their own battery labs where they test this stuff. That's where Tesla came up with this tabless cell. It's not like they just suddenly hired these people. They've been working on it for a while, and they have different approaches. And so it's just, my point is that producing batteries is very different.
Okay, so what I'm saying is they're going to achieve 6 million vehicles, not including the 2023 compact. Let's say 2024. And you're saying no. How many vehicles do you think they'll be able to produce in 2024, not including the 2023 compact?
How many will they be able to produce?
Yes, produce and sell.
3 to 4 million.
Okay, still a pretty good growth story. What about the 2023 compact? What do you think of that vehicle?
Yeah, so, it depends if it's a China-specific model. I do think that there will be a model for the Chinese market. There will be a similar model for the European market. And maybe they'll just do a smaller, more urban vehicle in the U.S. But that excites me. That's where we have most of that growth. And so I think in 2030 we have it at like 85% of all of its vehicles that just that one model.
Okay, but we're working on. I'm just. What do you think the 2023? What do you think the 2023 compact is going to be? What's going to be special about it?
So I think it's going to come out closer to 2024 in meaningful scale.
I agree.
I think it'll have a smaller battery pack that's much more energy dense. Obviously, I think that.
Wait. Why is it going to be more energy dense? They're going to use LFP.
At that point, that's how battery technology works. Obviously, it's going to. Energy density is improving every year, regardless of if they do that in-house or if they buy CATLs or
Okay, but what's special about the vehicle? It's got an energy dense battery. What else?
Yeah, well, it's a smaller battery. I also think that the casting, it could even be a complete single unit casting.
I agree.
Definitely, if they're going to scale, to that amount of vehicles, that they have to simplify the manufacturing process, and I think they can. And so when
what about 48-volt wiring? Do you think it'll have 48-volt wiring?
Yeah, I've heard people toy with that. I don't see why they wouldn't at that point. But I have no reason to think not. But so just the big factor there is that they're producing that at scale. And it's just simply a smaller battery pack, lighter vehicle. That's how they'll get millions of vehicles every year. I think in the first, it depends obviously. The first 12 months, that vehicle alone will do 400,000 units, is what we say. So
say that again.
400,000 units in the first 12 months, and that's like how Model 3 was, scaling, just 2,000 per week, and then they bump that up. I think in the first 12 months of Model 3, well, obviously it's nowhere close to 400,000. 400,000, that's very optimistic for an early production vehicle. And I think that will come out of, we say Gigafactory 3 first.
Okay, so, and you think there'll be one of these factories in China, one of these factories in Europe? You think there will be one in Austin as well, or somewhere in the US?
Yeah, I think that they'll produce it there in Austin. They just have more land to expand. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna have 3 of these factories, one on each continent, maybe more somewhere else.
Yeah.
And 400,000 in the first year. What ultimately, how many vehicles do you think one of these factories will be able to produce a year when it's at fully ramped?
Be able to produce or will produce?
Able to produce.
Just that
one factory
vehicle, just that vehicle alone.
Yes.
At max, or in the first 2 years.
And once they fully ramped.
So like 2030, 2032.
I think it takes them 18 months to ramp. So I would say 2025.
Yeah, I'm just saying. So, okay. So I say that they, out of one of those factories, they could, your one factory per continent, probably 800,000 to 1.1 million, somewhere in that range.
Why would it be so small? Why would the number be so small? I see those factories producing 4 million vehicles apiece.
Well, I mean, well, first of all, how many vehicles do you even have? Do you think Tesla will sell in 2030?
I think Tesla will sell 18 million vehicles in 2026. That's where I was going with my numbers. That if you get 6 million vehicles out of the 3Y, SX, Roadster, Semi, Cybertruck, you get 6 million vehicles a year out of that. And then you add 3 of these new factories producing 4 million vehicles a year each, you get 12 million vehicles a year from those. Added to the 6 million, you have 18 million vehicles a year, roughly 2026. Bruce Burnworth, who I was talking to last night, thinks it's going to be 20 million in 2025. So I'm the bear compared to Bruce Burnworth. But how much do you think Berlin is ultimately going to produce? For 3 and Y together, you think Berlin and Y together, Berlin 3 and Y together will top out at 1 million vehicles?
From just that, from the $25,000 model?
No, Berlin 3 and Y will top out at 1 million vehicles. And Tesla's improvement on this new vehicle will be trivial compared to that, will not be that much compared to that?
No, of course not. Well, first of all, those factories are only planned for 500,000 vehicle capacity, installed capacity per year.
But 3 and Y together is 1 million.
Yeah.
Right?
But again, so let's say that they just double it, right? So like for Austin, let's say they go from 500,000 and they're at somehow 100%, 100% utilization. And they just double that, then sure, then they can produce 1 million vehicles out of that one factory.
Okay. All right. Let me move on, because I think we've established where we disagree, and I don't think we're going to make progress beyond this. I want to ask you about something else. We talked about Lucid, we talked about Rivian, and there's this trend going on that I'm interested in your take on. For those who are interested in the Tesla talk, I think we're going to be moving away from the Tesla talk now, and I hope you'll indulge me a little bit here and go to somewhere else. There's this trend for SPACs. Lucid went to this SPAC with CCIV. There's this trend where these companies, somebody forms a company called a SPAC, and then they acquire a privately held company. And there's this trend. And like, for me personally, I've been very critical of the Lucid CCIV merger. I think they misled the public about when they deliver cars before the SPAC merger was announced. As soon as the SPAC merger was announced, all of a sudden deliveries were pushed back. Production was pushed back. Do you see something that concerns you for retail investors, for fairness to retail investors, about the SPAC trend?
In the electric vehicle space, or just in general?
General.
Yeah, I do. I think that, and while there are some fantastic opportunities, I think that it's there's just not enough information for investors. They don't file an S1 the same way that, if you were to traditionally do it, a company like WeWork, if there's a reason that they didn't IPO and it kept getting pushed back and kept getting pushed back. And if I see them IPO, go through a SPAC merger, that's not going to be popular. And that's why a lot of these SPACs, I think the SPAC index is like down 40% just this year. So, there was this hype early on, oh, wow, this company that I've never heard of just came out of nowhere and now I can trade it. But then people started really digging in, and it wasn't until, really they had a full quarter to then, show their, basically show their work. And it almost, I wouldn't say almost all, but most of them, it's the financials are pretty terrible. And all, as you know, with Lucid, the language changes when they, before, they're just, even in their second series round, and then all of a sudden now they're going public. That's, and somehow their entire growth story changes. So yeah, I think that it's misleading, and that there needs to maybe be more, regulation around it. And really, the process shouldn't be that easy. There's a reason that an IPO process is very
Well, let me go down this path with you for a second, because I've started getting interested in venture capital, which I don't think you do, right? You're doing hedge fund; it's a little different. You do.
We do SPVs, but yeah.
Pardon?
We do special purpose vehicles.
Well, that is sort of that can be a VC thing.
It can. But
okay, so what I see is the federal regulations make it very hard for the retail investor to buy into a venture capital investment. It's you have all these rules, Series D, whatever, Regulation D, Regulation S, whatever. There's all these regulations. Accredited investor, all this stuff that makes it difficult. And in theory, this is to protect retail investors from unscrupulous startups and venture capitalists. And in practice, what I see is it's protecting middle-class people from the danger they might get rich. And then the other side of it is this SPAC process basically allows the venture capitalists to scam retail investors out of as much money as possible. And so the fiction that the regulations that protect retail investors from venture capital just allows venture capitalists to get in on these companies early and then dupe them in the SPAC process or the IPO process or whatever. Do you think I'm being unfair to the federal government and to venture capitalists when I say that?
I think that's a net result of it, but I don't think that's their intent, and I don't think they even think of it that way. And I don't see why they would do that. I think that there are rules.
Well, I mean, why would the Connecticut government prevent Tesla from selling cars in Connecticut? Because
special interest groups.
Because government sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, and because venture capitalists are a special interest that have a lot of influence. Wealthy people have a lot more influence with the SEC than retail investors have.
Yeah. Yes, but so there are definitely provisions to protect someone who can't afford. Let's say you wanted to invest in SpaceX. And the same way people invest in Tesla, they 99 or 100% of their portfolio of their life savings is in this one company, and then it goes bankrupt. The government has it in the American people's best interest not to do that, not to allow that to happen. And so I think that. So
you think government should prevent people from investing all their retirement funds in Tesla stock?
I think a good solution could be. And this has been proposed, but that they could, you can't have more than, you have to basically prove that, and instead of having to prove that, you have $1 million to be, to be an accredited investor, then if you could somehow say, all right, I have $100,000 in savings and limit it to, 30% of that you can invest in, the private sector. I think that could be a solution.
So which politician do you think is smart enough and wise enough to make these decisions to protect me from my inability to make good choices for myself?
I mean, I don't think. First of all, I don't think that's a real focus for politicians. And
no, but these laws.
I can't name one. I don't.
These laws that make it difficult to invest in startups make it more difficult for startups to raise money, make it more expensive for startups to raise money, make it difficult for retail investors to invest. Like, so SpaceX is a great example. There's no reason to protect retail. And here's the end result, right? Like, I want to invest in SpaceX and I can't invest in SpaceX because of all these regulations. And if I want to invest in SpaceX and I go to Shares Post or I go to EquityZen and I look around, I can find an opportunity where I have to pay a 5% commission, 2% management fee, and 20% carried interest in order to buy stock in SpaceX. Thank you for protecting me from the risk that I might actually make money. Right? I mean, thank you for protecting the venture capitalists who run the funds that get SpaceX and the hedge funds who actually get access to SpaceX stock directly and then can charge an arm and a leg for me to get in on it. This is the point of what they're doing, and this dates back to 1930. It's not like any current politician set this scheme up. It's just that once you have a regulation that supposedly protects us, then it never dies.
It's the same thing with the Connecticut.
So let me turn to a different topic.
Anyone, yeah, sure.
Let me just turn to a different topic. So you mentioned your focus on ESG with Snowball Capital, and there's a particular topic that I'm curious if you've thought about, because I think this is an ESG play. Plant-based meat, lab-based meat, Memphis Meats, Impossible Foods, Beyond Meats, which is publicly traded. Do you see those as fitting into the ESG space?
The greater ESG space, totally. Yeah, they already do.
So what do you, I mean, have you looked at those companies at all?
Not for my company. We have pretty strict,
So why do they not fit in your guidelines? I'm not criticizing. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, we actually thought about adding that. There aren't enough players yet, and another company that
and you don't buy. To be clear, you don't buy privately held companies. So I think only Beyond Meat would be the only one you could invest in. Okay.
Yeah. And another thing kind of in that same area are companies like App Harvest, if you've heard of them. They have these big warehouses. And again, this is just what I've looked into it a bit in my free time, but and they have these hydroponic they're basically like massive greenhouses, and they reduce, you can grow all types of vegetables all season, and it employs a bunch of people, and it's like it uses like 80% less water, and the yield is much higher.
But that's vegetables, not meat, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, that the same kind of thing. That's definitely ESG. And
because the Beyond Meat Impossible Food story is basically there. And I've had the Beyond Burger, and I've had the Impossible Whopper, and I actually think they're great. I literally
was surprised.
Now I usually get mine with bacon, real bacon.
Okay, so there you go.
But I do.
No, they do bacon.
I think they're working on that. But when you go to the restaurants that I go to, they don't have. Well, not the Burger King Impossible Whopper, but the Beyond Burger at a place called BurgerFi. I've gotten it with bacon on it. I think those burgers are fine, and I think it's a challenge of getting cost down, but it's that they use a lot less water, they use a lot less energy, they use a lot less land, and ultimately, if they're able to get to the point where they can make meat cost competitive with regular meat, with animal-based meat, then they can revolutionize the environmental impact of meat on the planet. So I just thought that was interesting, but I don't need to go further in that. I wanted to ask you about Apple. You said you watched the Apple event. What Apple product were you most excited about?
Probably, this is not their big event. It's usually in September. That's when iPhone revenue is everything for Apple. But they didn't announce enough with services, and that's growing revenue segment for them. But I'd say the iPad Pro. It's but not even enough for me to buy it. But it was. They're in COVID. They're really it's like a whole movie production now with these launch events. But nothing was super exciting. But anytime there's an Apple event, I get excited.
I've got all these friends who are raving about the iPad Pro, and I'm like, why would I use that over a MacBook? Yeah,
I haven't. Everyone else in my office uses iPad Pros, but I prefer a laptop. I don't know. It's just.
And then they had this. Preference.
They're very powerful.
They had this tag thing. What is it called?
AirTags. Yeah.
What's the use case for an AirTag?
I guess if you lose your keys a lot, but at CES 2 years ago, there was like an entire exhibition hall full of just these companies. They like to put similar companies in the same area, and like of all these companies, I actually ordered one of these because it was like so cheap, and I just checked last week, and all those companies went out of business. So they went from having a booth at CES to, and also Apple bought, the biggest player in that space. But yeah, I don't really know. I think they're still pretty expensive too.
Do you think that somebody will come up with do you think they have a moat that would prevent somebody with coming out with an Android, the equivalent of an Android version of this for $10 instead of 25 or $30 for the Apple version?
I think, yeah, I just don't think anyone's even thought to do that.
Okay. All right. So I don't think I have a lot else to ask you. I don't think I'm seeing a lot of questions here to ask you. Is there anything you want to ask me or anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just quickly, I know that your Tesla 2030 numbers, some of them get pretty high. Yeah, I want to ask you how, I think one of them is like 200 million vehicles or something.
I think it's I don't think it's 200 million vehicles produced. I think there's a scenario where you could see 100 million robotaxis operating, which is, so at some point you get to the limit of how much is the demand for robotaxi rides, which I think 100 million, somewhere between 100 million and 200 million, but that's not produced. It's not 200 million vehicles produced. And I have a lot of different numbers. I have a lot of different models. My ballpark estimate for 2030 is $50,000 a share. And I primarily get there between robotaxis making a lot of money and a huge volume of battery cell production, primarily LFP that Tesla's buying from CATL that go into megapacks. But I can come up with numbers different ways and I can give you different results. And it sort of depends on where you think things are going. Like, I think that megapack is going to be phenomenal because we're going to see this. I think you probably, where do you see, let's go there for a second. Where do you see the shift in energy generation going from fossil fuels to solar and wind? Do you see that continuing and growing? Do you see the price of solar and wind dropping per kilowatt hour?
Yeah, so wind is pretty, it's not going to drop nearly as much as photovoltaics. But there are two things there are two promising commercialization technologies, and that's obviously in this space. So that's solid state batteries, and then these flow batteries. You mentioned QuantumScape, so I assume that most people know about solid state.
I don't know about flow, but I know about solid state. So
these flow batteries, they're really promising for energy storage systems.
What's that called, like vanadium flow or something?
Yeah, exactly. So there are two types, zinc air and vanadium flow. So their cost is good, the cyclability is good. Vanadium flow batteries cheap. That's already below $100 per kilowatt hour. That has high cyclability, like LFP range, like 12,000 cycles. I've seen, but it has poor volumetric energy density,
which is not important for megapack.
Yeah, not as much. It has lower charge and discharge rates than lithium ion, but it's a trade-off. Zinc air it's pretty much like scaling up a hearing aid battery, and that's still more at the lab level.
But wait, before we get into batteries, do we agree that solar and wind are going to gradually displace fossil fuel energy generation?
Yeah, totally, of course.
Okay,
yes.
So when that happens, because the sun doesn't shine at night and because the wind doesn't always blow, we're going to need grid storage to store that energy to be used when it's not. Yeah. And we're going to need a lot of storage. So I think there's a huge market for megapack, and Tesla doesn't need to have 100% market share. Tesla can have a fairly small market share of grid storage and still make a ridiculous amount of money on megapack. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So when I get to my numbers, I mean, the big driver of my numbers is if they deliver robotaxis and they're able to.
By the way, what percent do you think Tesla will own those vehicles versus in 2030?
Robotaxis?
Yeah.
So far, I don't see a competitor on the horizon that's going to be able to compete with Tesla robotaxis. I think they'll have a dominant market share, more than 50%.
Okay, but
because I think that other companies
can own one versus no one can own them. Like Tesla owns them.
I think the primary business model will be Tesla will own its own robotaxi fleet, but there will be people who have bought cars before Tesla stopped selling them that will operate them in the
All
fleet.
right, so
The problem with
what year do you think they'll stop? Because I agree with you. But what year do you think?
2025 or 6, maybe earlier.
Yeah.
And I don't think they'll necessarily completely stop selling cars. They'll just sell them at outrageously high prices, and only rich people will be able to buy them. And people will buy them.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
I don't know how many Model S's are going to go into the Robotaxi fleet. If they're still making Model S's and people are willing to pay $400,000 for a Model S, then people will buy them. So I think what you're going to see is, let me just give you a scenario. So let's suppose Tesla has a fleet of 10 million Robotaxis. The 2023 Robotaxi that's going to be built in Shanghai and Texas and Berlin, that's going to cost significantly less than 10 cents a mile to operate. Not per passenger mile, but I mean not per occupied mile, but per mile driven. And I think at 10 million vehicles in the Robotaxi fleet, I think you're still getting $1 a mile from the customers, and you're operating 100,000 miles a year. You're operating, let's say, 60,000 miles occupied. So you have $60,000 in revenue, and your cost is about $10,000. So you have $50,000 in profit for Robotaxi times 10 million vehicles is $500 billion in profit a year. Gross profit, not net profit. So that level of profit, that doesn't include whatever you're making on energy. That doesn't include whatever you're making if you're still selling cars. If you take that out, you go out to 2030 and you say, okay, now every vehicle produced or nearly every vehicle produced goes into the Robotaxi fleet. I think you could conceivably get to a Robotaxi fleet of 100 million vehicles by 2030, at which point, somewhere along this path, a lot of people have decided, I'm not going to buy a car anymore. I'm not going to have my own car anymore. I'm going to start riding Robotaxi instead of having my own car. And the price per mile has now dropped below 70 cents a mile to, let's say, 50 cents a mile, which is below the average amount the average American spends on their car. So at 50 cents a mile in revenue times 60,000 miles, and I think you're probably going to get more than 60,000 miles. You got $30,000 in revenue minus probably less than 10 cents a mile. So you got $30,000 in revenue minus probably less than $10,000 in cost, because they're going to improve the cost structure further by 2030. But call it $20,000 in profit times 100 million vehicles, and you have $2 trillion in profit in 2030 from the Robotaxi network alone. That's actually bigger than the number I calculated last time. The last time I got a number, I got 1.6 trillion from that number. So 1.6 trillion in gross profit leads to a really, really high valuation, right? Because we're not, and then you include Megapack, where I think you're making like $500 billion in profit from Megapack by 2030. Because it's just
what percent do you think will be energy in terms of revenue?
No, Robotaxi is dominant.
Yeah, but what percent
of revenue? What do I think the margins are?
No, just what percent of total revenue will be from energy? You can lump solar in.
I don't think I looked at it in revenue. I looked at it in terms of profit. The problem is that
what percent profit? Like,
it's probably around 25. It's probably around 25 or 30% of the profit. Robotaxi just dominates in this model. It's hard to avoid Robotaxi dominating, and I actually think, we could take a step further and say at some point I think Tesla has to spin off the Robotaxi network as a separate company.
Yeah, especially if it wants to be domiciled in the United States.
Well, I mean, it may even spin it off to Robotaxi China, Tesla Robotaxi China, Tesla Robotaxi North America, Tesla Robotaxi Europe, Tesla Robotaxi India. The Indian version is driving mini buses that are taking like volumes of people rather than individual passengers. I think there's a lot of ways that could break down. I haven't even got into Dojo as a service, which, who was it? Alex? There's a guy named Alex. I can't think of his last name. It's not Tourville. There's another guy I follow on Twitter who was pointing to ARK Invest's model for AI training revenue in, say, 2030, and it's this monster number. The potential revenue from AI training is, so I'm not even including that and where I think Tesla could go. I think if Dojo succeeds in training FSD, and then you take this technology and you say, okay, let's provide AI training services like AI cloud training services or something, I think you're going to see this monster revenue stream that it's not even in my models. But I do think when you get there to $1.6 trillion in Robotaxi profit plus, another 500 billion from Megapack, and you're at like $2 trillion in profit, gross profit, you start to get to insane valuations. It's hard to avoid because, you get a price earnings ratio of 30 and you're at $60,000 a share, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think I may disagree with you.
Oh, most people, a lot of
Yeah.
Tesla bulls think I'm going too far when I come up with those numbers. But where am I wrong in that? I mean, do you think it's impossible to have 100 million robotaxi fleet?
From one company?
Well, if they're the lowest cost provider, who else is going to be able to make robotaxis that are that low cost per mile to operate?
Well, so I mean, when you look at mobility as a service, the brand doesn't carry nearly enough weight, and so if there is, you just have to basically say what just the raw number of how many robotaxis there are. You can look at it regionally, you can look at it globally, and the thing is, right now there are a lot of companies that have delivered robotaxis like that with no driver.
Well, we already agree. We disagree on that. The key.
Well, I'm just saying that there's already competition.
But the key detail there is if Teslas are able to operate at less than 10 cents a mile and the robotaxi, the other competitors are operating at 50 cents a mile, is not really a competition. And I would say that, let me just take a step back for a second. You're familiar with Starlink, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's this point about first mover advantage. If Starlink gets up and running, which it already effectively is, and they start deploying a fleet of satellites and they start delivering low-cost internet service, and now you're Jeff Bezos and you're thinking about launching your competitive satellite network, but your launch costs are higher because you don't have Starship, right? So your launch costs are higher, your manufacturing costs for your satellites are higher. At some point, you've got to say, okay, am I going to invest 10 billion, 20 billion, $50 billion building out my satellite network when they're already going to have all the customers and no one's going to choose my network because they're going to be lower cost provider than I am? And it's the same thing with robotaxis. If I'm correct and Tesla scales robotaxi first, and Tesla is effectively the lowest cost provider of robotaxi services, and you're thinking about building your own fleet of robotaxis, your Toyota, your Volkswagen, your BYD, whoever you are, unless you can produce your robotaxi fleet that's able to deliver the cost per mile that's competitive with what Tesla's doing, you're not going to be able to generate enough profit for it to make sense to build out your fleet. That's the first mover advantage that makes that possible. That's the moat. The moat is the cost per mile. It's not the self-driving, because I think we agree that at some point other people will be able to deliver self-driving software, right? That's going to be effectively not the thing. It's the cost per mile. It's the ability to manufacture vehicles that are able to deliver that robotaxi service at a low cost per mile that I don't think anybody else is going to be able to compete. And even if they were thinking we could get there, the investment they would have to make to become number 2 in the field would not be justified. It wouldn't be a smart investment. That's the theory.
If you're saying that that Tesla's market cap is going to be higher than the GDP of most countries, then there are a lot of people who will invest everything into that. And big companies like Apple.
I'm going to accuse you of
like Didi.
I'm going to accuse you of making a common mistake. Okay. The comparison to GDP is not a fit.
I know. It's
profit,
that big of a number.
Profit is a good comparison to GDP. Market cap is not a good comparison. Market cap.
I'm just saying the scale that we're talking, and if they're going to have 100 million vehicles, and with very high utilization rate, and low cost of operating, then of course everyone's going to try to get into that. And I'm just saying that.
But you understand the first mover advantage problem, right? If somebody else gets there first,
any technology,
your investment that you have to make is high, and the return you're going to get is low because you're going to be competing against somebody who's a lower cost provider. How do you scale?
Well, there are companies with a lot more cash that they can throw at this than Tesla.
Not in a couple of years. There won't be. Tesla's going to have more cash than everybody else very quickly because once they spin the robotaxi network up, somebody says Taylor Swift is going to compete with them. Taylor Swift is going to have more money than Tesla. I think that once Tesla scales up once they get the robotaxi fleet running, once they're going to start generating profits at a massive scale. And yes, Apple has more money now, but Apple doesn't have anywhere close to the ability to produce a fleet. So you would have to see it now, and you would have to say, this is where it's going. There's going to be a market for 100 million robotaxis, and we need to get a robotaxi that's going to operate at less than 10 cents a mile within 5 years. And nobody's going to be able to pull that off. Nobody's going to be able to pull that off in time to get there before Tesla gets there. And then you're looking at, okay, now we're second mover. Now we're gonna have a higher cost. We're not gonna be able to compete on price with these guys, and you're not gonna make a profit in the same way. And so it's not going to be worth the investment to try to compete with them. That's the challenge. There's this concept of first mover advantage. And I think that's the challenge that faces anybody who wants to be number two in a robotaxi space. It's the same challenge that somebody faces. They want to be in a satellite internet provider space.
But you can't say that they're a first mover when they don't have a robotaxi, and there are other companies that have robotaxis.
Right. But you and I disagree about whether those robotaxis are real.
I mean, if that's your thesis, I mean, first of all, that's a crazy conspiracy theory that you really think that all of these companies have humans somehow operating them.
I do not believe that someone else has developed a level 5 robotaxi without having the data and without having someone like Andrej Karpathy and a team like Andrej Karpathy has put together. I do not believe it. Just like I don't believe that Lucid Motors has a 517-mile range car that'll do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. You know, all of the stuff that Lucid Motors is claiming. There are people who make fraudulent claims. It happens all the time. And the plain and simple reality is if you have it, then scale it.
Vehicles. I've ridden in.
Yeah, but you can't know that it's not a remote operator. We've been through this.
I mean, I was in a Baidu Apollo, 18 months ago. And I just said, I thought that they had pretty much like pre-mapped the specific route and everything. And so I said, have it take a left. And they said, okay, well, just update it on your phone. So I quickly updated it on my phone and the route, and it took that left. And then I said, all right, now take this right and make a U-turn. And it started they're like, it's
so that was 18 months ago. Why haven't they scaled?
I get this scaling. No, you should look it up. I mean, I get that when you only compare things to Waymo, and Waymo is not a great example, but at the same time, Waymo has, a network that you can sit in the back seat of that car. You can't do that with Tesla. Tesla can't do that.
You can do anything with a remote operator. I can't prove the remote operator hypothesis, and you can't disprove the remote operator hypothesis. You can say I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, and let's be blunt. I am a conspiracy theorist because there are real conspiracies. Okay. I don't think conspiracy theorist is a bad thing. The Manhattan Project was a massive conspiracy, right? I mean, there's a long history of conspiracies that actually happened. It's a conspiracy theory. I don't think it's a crazy conspiracy theory. And the proof is that if you had a robotaxi that actually worked and was actually cost competitive with Uber and Lyft and taxis, then you would have scaled it. And if you haven't scaled it, I have the same argument with people. I'm really into the potential for housing, for somebody coming up with a better way of producing housing. And every time I bring it up, people send me, oh, check out this 3D printed house they did in Long Island. And I'm like, okay, did they do a second one? No. Yeah. Well, anybody can do a prototype, right? I've got a prototype quiet doghouse downstairs that I'm working on. But until I produce a second one, until I produce a third one, until I start producing them in volume and selling them, it's a nice idea, Warren. Okay, so the fact that you have some demonstration project somewhere that nobody can really verify whether you're doing what you're claiming, the proof is in the pudding. Scale it, show me it works at scale, and then I'll believe it. Until you produce it at scale, I think it could be a parlor trick, and we can't distinguish the difference. But the way I can tell it's a parlor trick is if it really worked, you would have scaled it, because the profit potential is unbelievable for an actual functioning robotaxi.
So I mean, when you say you can't scale it, these companies are operating, in like for example, Waymo, they have a whole network of, I don't know if you've seen, they have like these safety cars that, kind of come rescue it when it gets stuck and things like that. And other companies, they prefer to have remote operators, steer it out of this freezing that they call it. But if you have, you have to clean these cars. They have to come back to a central hub. If they're electric, they have to charge. It has to be someone to plug it in. And then there's also the local laws that by which you have to abide. So but
it works. That's it. They're better than humans.
So they are. I mean, again, I don't like to always talk about what they're doing in China.
No, let's talk about the one
down.
Let's talk about the one you drove in 18 months ago. You rode in 18 months ago. That was fantastic.
I've been in a lot of autonomous vehicles.
But yeah. you mentioned one that 18 months ago you said make a left here, and you updated it on the app, and it did what you said.
Yep.
Okay. Why? How many do they have operating now? Why don't they have 100,000 of them?
I mean, there are a lot of people who are really hesitant to even get in them. Some of these companies, they struggle finding enough people to even download the app because they just rather, if it's they actually charge the same if they want to, make any profit on it. The same as, I could get just a regular DD. And so, there are not a lot of people who would, the ones that have more people, it's like half the price of a DD, of regular DD. So there are just a lot of people that don't want to get in them. But also, we're just like 2 quarters in here. We're just getting started. But the point is that you can't sit in the backseat of a Tesla right now. And there are companies that were founded after Tesla, started selling full self-driving package.
Okay,
so how is that possible?
Let me try to finish this up. So where do you see Tesla in 2030? Vehicles is how far out do you go with Tesla?
The 2035. I mean, technically 2040, but it's
where's Tesla peak? Where does Tesla peak? How many vehicles do they produce? How much profits do they make? What's their share price?
Yeah, so in 2030, I see the peak in 2031 and 2032. And by the way, I don't think that Tesla can't deploy a Robotaxi fleet. I just think they need to. I think they need to improve mostly hardware and then more in-cabin facing cameras that can actually see all the passengers more clearly. They need to have some more sensors, even small things like facial recognition. They could tap into the B pillar, but to actually unlock the car to prove that's you, that's an issue already in China. Yeah, so we see Tesla peaking in terms of sales in 2031 and 2032.
With how many vehicles?
Around 7 million.
Okay, 7 million vehicles, and how much energy storage do you think they'll deploy in 2020? Do you think that's a significant part of their story or not?
Energy storage, yeah, it's
gigawatt hours, terawatt hours.
Yeah, so over 100 gigawatt hours in actual deploy, not
a year
installed capacity in the year 2030. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not very big compared to 7 million vehicles. 100 gigawatt hours of grid storage is not very big.
Not really.
Okay, so 7 million vehicles. What do you think their profit is? What do you think their share price is in 2031, 2030, 2032?
Yeah, so if you, let's just say that, because again, we have models where if Tesla actually achieves 20 million vehicles in 20, we don't think that they will. So we think that Tesla could in-house in 4680, over about 450 gigawatt hours. They'll have to buy about a terawatt hour from suppliers. In 2030, I think we have them at 5.2 million sales total. That average pack size is 63. So if that revenue will be about $250 billion in revenue. We think net profit about just under 50 billion. So if you price earnings multiple of 30 times that, we have about $1,400 per share. So
okay.
And again, like that's a growth story. It's maybe not as
so
much
10
as,
years out the stock doubles
million, but
so 10 years out the stock doubles from today.
From what we know right now, and I think software as a service could be huge.
Well, no, but I mean we're about $700 a share now. You're seeing $1,400 a share in 2030.
Yes.
2031, I think you said. So 10 years. So doubling in 10 years is not very good.
No, but it's still definitely enough to remain bullish on.
But aren't there better investments that are more likely to double in 10 years than that?
But yes, and so that's why we don't have all of our eggs in one basket.
Is BYD publicly traded?
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
What's its market cap now?
73, 74 billion.
Where do you think that's going to be in 2031, 2032?
A lot higher. We think that it will be about, by 2030, 2031, about half of Tesla. So, and so we have Tesla at about $1.5 trillion. Well, 1.4 trillion.
So you think they're going to go from 73 billion to 750 billion?
Yep, to about where Tesla is now.
They're going to 10x in the same time that Tesla's going to 2x.
Yes.
Why would you own any shares of Tesla? Why wouldn't you put everything in BYD?
Well, I mean, obviously we have multiple investments. We're not just going to invest everything into one company. But if we're just talking about the two biggest players, then how many other companies are there? It's pretty terrifying to try to talk like this about Mercedes or BMW.
No, but just be clear, you're confident that BYD is going to 10x in 10 years, and you're confident that Tesla's not going to more than 2x in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean,
why would you hold Tesla stock when you could hold BYD instead? They're competitors in the same space. I mean, I'm not saying you don't hold other companies. I'm not saying you don't hold other companies, but if you're confident that BYD is going to 10x and Tesla's only going to 2x, I would think you would sell all your Tesla and put all of your Tesla in BYD. You might hold other companies that you're going to grow in other spaces.
Yeah,
but it wouldn't make sense to hold Tesla.
We have diversification requirements, and you can't just assume that for electric vehicles in general. And there are a lot of other smaller plays that have potentially higher growth stories than even these two companies. But tonight we're talking about batteries and electric vehicles. So these are the two companies that we are most excited about. And there's also just a lot more. That's Tesla at 30 times earnings. What if it still has if it's significantly higher, then we can start really getting into incredibly high numbers. But we have to be conservative with that 30 times price earnings ratio.
Well, do you own a greater? I'm not going to ask you for specific numbers, but do you have a greater holding in BYD than you have in Tesla?
Yeah, I can't comment on my company, obviously, but I personally, yes, I do. And by the way, with all the Lidar stuff and everything, all Lidar investments and even indirect investments are combined. My personal Tesla position is still higher. So it's, that's not, if we're talking about a 2030 growth story, yeah, Tesla is one of those companies.
Oh, I got to ask you something, because somebody said something. How did you choose the name Snowball? Because I love the name.
Well, we wanted words that, 2 words that are pretty simple. And I'm from Colorado, so I love the snow. And
do you ski?
Bullish market, yeah, of course, yeah.
Alpine skier, okay.
Yeah.
Steamboat Springs.
Yeah, we have a snowboarder in the office, so it's it's a little awkward. But no, yeah. So snow, and also if you go to our website, we have it's stupid graphic that I've made. The icebergs, coming together, because a lot of these companies are trying to mitigate as much as possible global warming. So yeah, snow to preserve snow and ice, and then bull, and our logo is a bull on an iceberg. So yeah, and obviously bull for a bullish market. But a lot of people they say it quickly and they're like snowball, like noble, noble invest. I don't know. So I guess that's fine. And it actually translates. Well, we were surprised that it wasn't taken. That was the big thing. We ran through a lot of different things. Couldn't believe that those two simple 4-letter words were not taken. There is a snow plower that's called the Snowball, and I get emails from some random Minnesota company every single day asking me if I want to buy more. But yeah, so
okay. So listen, we're getting late, and if I go longer, I'm gonna have trouble getting to sleep at a reasonable hour, because it's 11:15, and I want to try to get to sleep by midnight at the best.
Yeah.
So I really want to thank you, Taylor. This has been great. I don't agree with you, but it's really helpful to see how other people think. Gary Black, Gary Black is relatively a Tesla bull, but I don't agree with the way he thinks, but I'd like to understand how he thinks. And there's, a lot of trash talking in the chat, which I don't agree with, both ways. Somebody called me, what did somebody call me? somebody made fun of me. They said I was a Tesla simulation. I was a simulation run by Tesla's AI. So
it's entertaining, yeah.
Yeah, but I really I enjoyed the conversation. I'm very impressed with the way you think, and it was a pleasure. So I'm gonna end the stream, but I'll keep online with you if that's okay, just for a second. So thanks everyone for watching. Check out my other videos, t-shirts. Please support the channel on Patreon and check out Snowball Capital. Is there anything they could do to support you if the people who are enjoying this on your side? I mean, are you taking investors? Is there something that do you sell merch? Is there a Snowball merch?
Yeah, we have jackets. We don't sell them. Maybe
you got to start selling.
I know Arc does that. They're pretty popular. A lot of people like our logo. We paid like $70 for it.
I think you got to sell Snowball merch.
Okay.
So think about that and let me know. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, we don't agree on everything, but great conversation. Thank you very much for speaking with me. Everyone, thank you for watching. Merch, Patreon, join the channel. Thanks. And thanks to the moderators in particular for moderating the chat. So I'm going to end the stream. Taylor, listen, that was great. Thank you very much. Very important.